Prologue. The scent hit me first, sharp, acrid, wrong. Not the familiar musk of wolves, but something fouler, twisted by bloodlust. I shifted mid-step, fur rippling down my arms as my body reformed with a sickening crunch. My father was already beside me, silent and alert, his own transformation faster. His age hadn't dulled him. "How many?" he asked through the bond, his voice a low rumble in my mind. I inhaled deeply. The scent came from all directions. 7, maybe more, they've surrounded the cabin. He didn't hesitate. With a snarl, he burst through the front door, and I followed him into the snow. The first rogue lunged at him, frothing at the mouth, eyes glazed with something feral and frantic. My father met him head-on, jaws locking around the rogue's throat. One savage shake, and it was over. I darted left as another wolf came at me, clipping my shoulder. I spun, using his weight against him, then sank my teeth into the soft spot beneath his jaw. Blood spilled hot against the snow. 2 down. But there was no time to breathe. The rest came all at once, a pack moving with unnatural coordination. They weren't acting like rogues, not really. I fought without thinking, claws slashing, teeth tearing, snow spraying crimson under the moonlight. My father was a storm beside me, but there were too many, and one didn't attack. A black-furred wolf stood at the tree line, watching. Too still, too aware. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to see. And then he was gone. We let him go. When it ended, the ground was littered with blood and bodies, but the message was clear, even if we didn't yet know what it meant. The next morning, Raphael's territory. Snow blanketed the woods in a thick, blinding sheet as I trudged toward the cabin. The scent of pine hung heavy in the air, muffling everything else. It was quiet here, untouched, safe. The door opened before I could knock. Raphael stood in the threshold, taller than I remembered. His dark hair had grown longer, brushing the collar of his shirt, and his eyes, still that unreadable storm gray, narrowed slightly when he saw me. "Iris," he said, surprise flickering in his voice. Without thinking, I stepped forward and hugged him. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until that moment. He held me for a second, then pulled back, searching my face. "What happened?" I stepped past him, into the warmth of the cabin. The fire was already lit. It smelled like cedar and something faintly spiced. Raphael always kept this place like a sanctuary. "There was an attack last night," I said. 7 wolves, rogues, or pretending to be. His brow furrowed. "Where?" "At my father's cabin. They came out of nowhere. We fought them off, but..." I hesitated. "One of them didn't fight, he just watched. Then he left." Raphael's expression hardened. "You think they were sent?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know." He crossed his arms, jaw tightening. "Then this is only the beginning." I nodded. "That's why I came." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You and your father need to move into my territory, at least for now. I can protect you better here." I hesitated. He won't be thrilled. He likes his freedom. "Yeah," I said. "He'll put up a fight, but I'll convince him." Raphael gave me a long look, then nodded once. "Good, because I don't want to find out what their next message looks like." Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the trail behind me, and whatever blood might still stain the forest. Chapter 1. The rumble of the Harley was a balm against the night, a symphony of steel and freedom that drowned out the restless murmur of my wolf. 2 a.m. The forest was a blur of shadows and moonlight, my leather jacket a second skin against the bite of the wind. I'd been out tracking a lone stag for hours, a primal need to hunt a remnant from my lone wolf days. The kill had been clean, swift, and now a satisfying weariness settled deep in my bones. Nightshade territory rose around me, familiar sense of pine and damp earth washing over me, overlaid with the quieter, steady pulse of my adopted pack. It felt like home, or as close as it ever could. 7 years I'd been here, 7 years since Raphael had offered a sanctuary after the attack on our cabin. 7 years since I'd traded absolute independence for the messy, complicated, fiercely loyal embrace of a pack. I slowed the bike, downshifting as I approached the hidden entrance to the main compound, the engine's growl softening to a purr. My nostrils flared, anticipating the familiar blend of scents: Diana's quiet strength, Raphael's grounding presence, the playful energy of Christine. But something else hit me then, something that brought me up short, braking hard enough to skid a little on the damp gravel. New. Sharp, unfamiliar, and not in the way a lone rogue might be passing through. This was an imprint, multiple, strong, disciplined, powerful, another pack, here in Nightshade territory. My hand instinctively went to the hilt of the hunting knife strapped to my thigh, though I knew it was foolish. My wolf was already on high alert, fur prickling beneath my clothes. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the foreignness of these scents with the ingrained safety of Nightshade. Raphael wouldn't bring in just anyone, not after everything. My eyes scanned the trees, searching for any sign of trouble, but the silence was profound, save for the distant hoot of an owl. The air itself thrummed with a suppressed energy, a tension that hadn't been here when I left hours ago. I pushed the kickstand down, cutting the engine. The sudden quiet was deafening, amplifying the unfamiliar scents. They were coming from the direction of the main lodge and further towards the training grounds. Not hidden, not subtle. They wanted to be known. A knot tightened in my stomach. Pack life was still a series of adjustments, a constant negotiation between the wild freedom I craved and the undeniable comfort of belonging. I'd carved out my own space here, my own rhythm. I liked my patrols, my solitude, my work in the garage. This felt like a disruption, a seismic shift I hadn't been prepared for. Who were they? Why were they here? And what did they want? I pulled my helmet off, shaking out my black curls, the wind-whipped strands clinging to my face. My breath plumed in the cool night air. The answer, I knew, lay just beyond the tree line. And something deep inside me, a primal instinct honed by years of surviving alone, told me that whatever awaited me, it was going to change everything. Taking a steadying breath, I swung my leg over the bike. Time to face the uninvited guests. Chapter 2. I pulled my helmet off, shaking out my black curls, the wind-whipped strands clinging to my face. My breath plumed in the cool night air. The answer, I knew, lay just beyond the tree line. And something deep inside me, a primal instinct honed by years of surviving alone, told me that whatever awaited me, it was going to change everything. Taking a steadying breath, I swung my leg over the bike. Time to face the uninvited guests. The pack house was still buzzing with activity despite the late hour. I could hear voices drifting from Raphael's office as I made my way down the hallway, my boots silent on the hardwood floors. The unfamiliar scent was stronger here, layered with power and something that made my wolf stir restlessly. I knocked once before pushing open the door. Raphael looked up from behind his desk, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Iris, good you're back." He gestured to the chair across from him. "We need to talk." I remained standing, crossing my arms. "The Northern Pack, who are they?" "Moonstone Pack." Raphael's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "Led by Alpha Damon Blackthorne, they're here seeking an alliance." Moonstone. The name sent a chill down my spine. Even lone wolves had heard whispers of them, the most feared and powerful pack in the Northern Territories. And they're Alpha. "How long?" I asked. "They leave tomorrow evening. Blackthorne can't stay away from his territory longer than that. Too many threats on his borders." Raphael studied my face. "Why the interest?" I shrugged, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "Just want to know what we're dealing with." But as I left his office, my wolf was anything but neutral. Something was coming, something that would change everything. By late evening, my restlessness had reached a breaking point. The scent of unfamiliar wolves had settled over Nightshade like a shroud, clinging to every breeze. I'd tried to distract myself with patrol reports, with maintenance on my bike, with anything that would quiet the strange buzzing under my skin. Nothing worked. The training grounds were usually my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the rhythm of combat. The worn earth, the scent of sweat and effort, the echoes of countless spars. Today, I needed that release more than ever. I was mid-spin, my leg snapping out in a swift, controlled kick when I felt him. A ripple in the air, a presence that was both dominant and unnervingly still. My wolf went utterly silent, then began to pace. My head whipped around, my body already bracing. He stood at the edge of the training ring, leaning against one of the thick timber posts, arms crossed over a broad chest. Tall, powerfully built, with shoulders that strained the fabric of his dark shirt. Even in the soft morning light, I could make out the sharp angles of his jaw, the almost predatory intensity in his storm-gray eyes. He was watching me, his gaze unblinking, assessing every fluid movement of my combat drills. The moment our eyes met, the world shifted. The air between us crackled with an energy that had nothing to do with the morning training session and everything to do with recognition. My wolf stopped pacing and went completely still, as if she were holding her breath. Mate. The word whispered through my mind like a prayer and a curse all at once. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not with him. Damon Blackthorne, the alpha of Moonstone Pack. I felt it, the sheer weight of his presence, even from a distance. And from the way his entire body had gone rigid, the way his nostrils flared slightly as he caught my scent, I knew he felt it too. I dropped my stance, my breath coming harder than it should have from just the drills. My muscles screamed a silent protest, yet my wolf was suddenly buzzing with an entirely different kind of energy. He pushed off the post, his movements fluid, unhurried as he stepped into the ring. Each step was deliberate, confident, but I caught the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides. He was fighting the same pull I was. "You fight like someone with something to prove," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground and straight into my bones. My jaw tightened. The mate bond hummed between us, but I wasn't about to roll over just because fate had a twisted sense of humor. "And you watch like someone who's never seen real fighting." A slow, wolfish smile, utterly devoid of humor, stretched his lips. It didn't quite reach his eyes, but I caught the flicker of heat there, the same recognition burning in my chest. "Perhaps I haven't seen your kind of fighting." He gestured to the open space between us. "Care to demonstrate?" My wolf stirred, a growl catching in my throat. He wasn't asking. He was challenging. And despite the chaos in my head, despite the impossible situation we just walked into, a thrill sparked in my veins. This was familiar territory, a language I understood better than whatever this mate thing was supposed to mean. "Gladly," I retorted, dropping into a ready stance. He moved first, a blur of motion, surprisingly fast for a man his size. I met his attack, deflecting his initial strike with my forearm, the impact jarring. The moment our skin touched, electricity shot through me, making my wolf howl. His eyes flashed gold for just an instant, his wolf responding to the contact. He moved with brutal efficiency, every punch, every kick aimed to disable. But there was precision to it too, a control that spoke of years of disciplined training. Even as we fought, even as we tried to prove our dominance over each other, the mate bond pulled tighter with every contact, every shared breath. I ducked under a wide swing, countering with a jab to his ribs, feeling the hard muscle flex beneath my knuckles. He grunted, but recovered instantly, sweeping my leg. I twisted, narrowly avoiding the trip, and came up with a rapid succession of strikes. He blocked most of them, but I slipped one through, connecting with his jaw. He paused, a flicker of surprise in his storm-gray eyes before a glint of something else, amusement, desire, replaced it. "Not bad," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my mouth before snapping back to my eyes. The fight escalated, a furious dance of power and agility. We traded blows, parried, dodged, the air thick with the grunt of exertion and the slap of skin against skin. He pushed me to my limits, found the edges of my defenses, and forced me to fight smarter, harder. He was relentless, a storm of controlled power, and I met him with every ounce of my fierce independence. But underneath it all, the mate bond thrummed like a live wire, making every touch electric, every shared breath intimate. We weren't just fighting, we were dancing around something neither of us was ready to acknowledge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he caught my arm, twisting it behind my back, his body pressing close against mine. I felt the heat of him, the hard muscle, the subtle scent of pine and something else, something uniquely him that made my wolf purr with satisfaction. My breath hitched. "Enough," he rasped, his voice close to my ear, and I could hear the strain in it, the same fight for control I was waging. "For now." He released me, but not before I felt his hand linger for just a heartbeat too long. I stumbled back a step, heart hammering, muscles screaming. My hair clung to my sweaty face, and I pushed it back with a trembling hand, trying to regain my composure. He was watching me, his chest heaving slightly, a sheen of sweat on his brow. But his eyes were intense, focused solely on me, and I could see the war playing out behind them. "You're strong," he said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "Fiercely so." I met his gaze, refusing to back down even as the mate bond sang between us. "You're not so bad yourself, Alpha." The moment stretched, thick with unspoken recognition. The heat from our spar still lingered, but it was overlaid with something infinitely more dangerous. The acknowledgement of what we both felt, what we both knew we couldn't act on. His hands clenched at his sides, and for a moment I thought he might step closer. Instead, he straightened, his alpha command reasserting itself like armor. "I have meetings," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "They start soon." He turned to leave, then paused at the edge of the ring, his back still to me. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "I have to go. God help me, I don't want to." Then he was gone, walking away with measured steps that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. He didn't look back, but he didn't need to. The mate bond stretched between us like a tether, pulling tighter with every step he took away from me. I watched him go, my wolf whining softly in my chest. He was going back to his pack, to his responsibilities, to a territory hundreds of miles away. And I was left here, with the lingering scent of him, the echo of his touch, and the devastating knowledge that fate had just handed me the one thing I couldn't have. My mate, the alpha of the most powerful pack in the north, the man who would leave tomorrow and might never come back. Perfect.
Chapter 3. The meeting had just ended. Another tedious hour of diplomacy and veiled threats that had done little to soothe the incessant thrum beneath my skin. My beta, Marcus, was already laying out the agenda for tomorrow, but the words drifted past me, meaningless. All I could hear, all I could feel, was the resonance of the mate bond, newly snapped, a raw, demanding current pulling me towards Iris Wolfe. I walked away from the conference room, the Nightshade Pack house a blur around me. My temporary quarters were quiet, a sterile space offering little comfort. I poured myself a glass of water, but it did nothing to quench the fire that still burned in my veins from our spar. She was an anomaly. Everything about her screamed contradiction. My mind replayed the movements on the training ground, the way she'd moved with that deceptively soft grace. Her black curls, wild from exertion, framing features that were too gentle for the ferocity in her eyes. 5'8" of lean muscle, a lithe predator disguised as something approachable, deceptive. That was the word. She was fire and steel, wrapped in silk. When her hand had connected with my jaw, a sharp, surprising blow, I'd felt not just the impact, but a jolt that had ripped through me. The mate bond, undeniable, absolute. My wolf had roared in recognition, a primal certainty that bypassed all logic, all strategy. My mate. The thought was a revelation. I was Alpha Damon Blackthorne, leader of the Moonstone Pack, the Storm. I was 29, and for 3 years my life had been nothing but expansion and defense, a constant, brutal battle for survival on our northern borders. My pack was elite, disciplined, self-sufficient. We had never needed help from anyone, and I had certainly never expected to find my fated mate during an urgent, precarious alliance negotiation, hundreds of miles from my embattled territory. "You fight like someone with something to prove," I'd said, trying to gauge her, to understand the wildness in her movements. "And you watch like someone who's never seen real fighting," she'd thrown back, her eyes sparking with a challenge that had both infuriated and intrigued me. She fought like a lone wolf, with an almost desperate self-reliance I hadn't seen in years. Not the rigid, trained precision of a pack warrior, but a raw, untamed instinct. It was beautiful, terrifying, and it drew me in like nothing else. She was everything that complicated the intricate balance of my life. My pack needed an alpha fully present, fully focused. They couldn't afford a constant, long-distance connection right now. And she wasn't the kind of female who would simply fall in line, who would meekly understand the brutal demands of my world. She'd fought me, challenged me, even as the mate bond tightened around us. God help me, I don't want to. The words had escaped me at the training grounds, raw and honest. I'd surprised myself. But it was the truth. My alpha wolf screamed at the thought of leaving her, of severing this newfound primal connection. I wouldn't sever it. I couldn't. I walked to the window, staring out at the shadowed Nightshade territory. This sanctuary, so peaceful, so untouched by the constant war I waged. She had found refuge here, built a new life, and I was about to walk out of it, leaving her behind for now. Tomorrow evening. I couldn't afford to stay longer. My borders were under constant threat from multiple rival packs, hungry for Moonstone's resources. Every hour away felt like a vulnerability. But the thought of leaving her, of the mate bond stretching across hundreds of miles, was a torment. How could I focus on skirmishes and patrols when my very soul was screaming for her presence? How could I lead my pack when half of me would be aching for the other half? Her beauty was undeniable, but it was the ferocity in her eyes, the sheer, untamed strength in her fighting that captivated me. She wasn't just beautiful, she was an equal, a force of pure, unadulterated will. The kind of mate an alpha like me didn't just want, but needed. I would have her. Just not now. A low growl rumbled in my chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I had to find a way to balance my duties with this bond. I would return, I would come back for her, and I would tell her that tomorrow, before I leave.
Chapter 4. The mate bond thrummed, a constant electric hum beneath my skin. It was everywhere. In the air I breathed, in the rhythm of my own heartbeat, in the lingering scent of pine, and something uniquely him that clung to the Nightshade territory. Damon Blackthorne. He was still here for a few more precious hours, and the knowledge both thrilled and tormented me. After the shock of the training grounds, after his silent admission of the impossible pull between us, I felt like a raw nerve ending. My border patrol had felt endless. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow was a distraction. My mind kept replaying his voice, his touch, the intensity in his storm-gray eyes when he looked at me. I was exhausted, but my wolf was buzzing, restless and unsatisfied. My tactical gear felt like a second skin, comfortable and familiar, but tonight it also felt heavy. My curls were wild from the wind, probably sticking out at odd angles, but I didn't care. All I wanted was quiet, the methodical work of cleaning my weapons, a task that usually brought a sense of calm. The armory was usually deserted this late. I pushed open the heavy door, the hinges groaning softly, and stepped inside. He was there. Damon Blackthorne. He stood by a workbench, bathed in the cool, low glow of an overhead lamp, methodically wiping down a blade. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing corded forearms, and his alpha scent filled the room, thick and powerful, now interwoven with the insistent hum of our bond. My breath caught just for a second. He looked up, those storm-gray eyes fixing on me. There was no surprise, just a quiet intensity that mirrored my own. No pretense tonight. The air crackled with the unspoken truth of our connection. "Trouble on patrol?" he asked, his voice low, gravelly, but edged with a tension I recognized. I shook my head, walking further into the armory, the clink of my boots on the concrete floor unnaturally loud in the quiet. "Just restless," I admitted, my voice rougher than intended. "Couldn't sleep." A faint, almost grim smile touched his lips. "Neither could I," he set his blade down, slowly, deliberately. The scrape of metal against wood echoed in the room. His gaze swept over me, lingering on the wildness of my wind-blown hair, the subtle curve of my lips. "The bond," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's louder than I expected." My jaw tightened, and equally inconvenient. He pushed off the workbench, moving toward me with that same unhurried confidence, but now there was an undeniable magnetism to his every step. "You think this is just an inconvenience, Iris?" he challenged, his eyes burning. "This isn't a fleeting attraction. This is primal. This is us." "And it's impossible," I shot back, though my voice wavered slightly. My wolf was purring deep in my chest, responding to his proximity, to the pull that grew stronger with every footstep he closed between us. "You leave today. You have a pack to defend, borders to hold. I have my own life, my own independence. He stopped inches from me, his presence overwhelming. You think I haven't thought of that? His voice was a low growl, frustration warring with something else, desire, naked and raw. Do you have any idea what it costs me to stand here, knowing I have to walk away? Then don't pretend this is anything other than what it is, I retorted, meeting his gaze head-on. A fated connection that can't be acted on. Can it? He challenged, his hand reaching out, his fingers brushing my cheek. The contact was electric, sending shivers down my spine. My breath hitched. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken things. This wasn't just a verbal spar. This was a collision of two impossible forces, fueled by a bond neither of us could deny. My body leaned into his touch, aching for more, even as my mind screamed caution. He leaned in, slow, deliberate, giving me every chance to pull away. But I couldn't. My eyes fluttered closed as his lips met mine, hard and demanding. It was a searing kiss, potent and raw, tasting of musk and moonlight and something wild that awakened my own deepest instincts. My wolf surged, roaring to life inside me, recognizing a kindred spirit. My fingers, still trapped by his, curled into fists. I wanted more, desperately, fiercely. The kiss deepened, a desperate, frantic need that consumed the air around us. He angled his head, groaning low in his throat, and my heart hammered against my ribs. This was fire, pure and unadulterated, threatening to burn away every carefully constructed wall. And then, a sharp knock echoed from the armory door, pulling us apart with a brutal wrench. Damon pulled back, his eyes blazing, his chest heaving. The sound came again, louder this time. Alpha Blackthorne, your presence is requested. Urgent. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. He looked at me, his gaze dark, frustrated before tearing himself away. He walked to the door, opened it just a crack, spoke a few terse words, then closed it again. He turned back to me, the moment shattered, the fire banked but still smoldering. The reality of his duties, his pack, his world had just crashed down. He was leaving. I have to go, he said, his voice clipped, rough. His eyes held mine for a long, charged moment, a silent promise and a sharp regret. But I'll be back. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the armory, leaning against the cold metal, my lips still tingling from his kiss. The scent of him lingered, a phantom touch, a potent reminder of the impossible tether that now bound us. He was gone, back to his life, his war. And I was left here with a restless wolf and a devastating new knowledge. My mate was the one person I couldn't have, yet had just promised to return.
Chapter 5. The 4-hour drive back to Moonstone territory felt like an eternity, each mile pulling me further from Nightshade, further from her. The mate bond, a screaming presence in my wolf, stretched taut across the landscape, an agonizing tether. Iris, her scent, the taste of her kiss, the feel of her fierce independence during our spar, it was all burned into my senses. I'll be back, I'd promised her, promised myself. But as the familiar, rugged peaks of the northern mountains began to rise on the horizon, the weight of my crown settled back onto my shoulders, heavy and demanding. Moonstone Pack. My grandfather had built this into a northern powerhouse, and my father had died in battle defending it. I'd become alpha at 26, and for 3 years my life had been a relentless expansion of territory and strengthening of defenses. We were known as the Storm for a reason, striking fast, hitting hard, disappearing before enemies could retaliate. My wolves were elite fighters, disciplined and proud, and we'd never needed help from anyone. That pride was our strength, but it was also a heavy mantle. The moment I stepped onto Moonstone land, the shift was immediate. The air thickened with the familiar, intense energy of my pack. Beta Marcus Stone, my childhood friend and most trusted advisor, met me at the border, his expression grim. Alpha, we have a skirmish on the western flank. Shadowclaw sent scouts across the river again. Gamma Coal Rivers is already there, Marcus continued, his voice tight. But they're bolder this time, and Luna Ashworth has intel suggesting a coordinated push from 2 other rival packs, the Iron Fangs and the Bloodmanes. They want our ore mines, our forests, our hunting grounds. My personal desires, the burning need to turn back and chase after my mate, were instantly shoved aside. This was my life. This was my duty. I spent the next 72 hours immersed in the brutal reality of alpha life. Briefings, tactical planning, leading patrols myself when necessary. My reputation preceded me, and the very presence of the storm on the front lines often deterred outright conflict. But the tension was a constant draining hum. The alliance with Nightshade had been crucial, a strategic masterstroke Marcus had helped broker. For too long, the northern packs had been fractured, easy prey for the larger, more aggressive southern packs. Uniting Nightshade's unparalleled tracking skills and knowledge of the deep forests with Moonstone's brute strength and disciplined warriors would create an unstoppable northern coalition. The talks had been successful. Raphael and I had agreed on terms that would bolster both our defenses, creating a united front against the encroaching threats. It was a victory, but a victory that had introduced an entirely new, deeply personal complication. Iris was 4 hours away by car, a manageable distance for a weekend trip perhaps, but for an alpha constantly defending borders, it was a chasm. The mate bond thrummed, a persistent ache in my chest, a constant reminder of what I had left behind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, fierce, soft, wild. A week passed in a blur of duties, every minute accounted for. I had a single moment to myself, let alone time to process the seismic shift in my life. But the hunger for her presence, the pull of the bond, only intensified. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Finally, late one evening, after dismissing Marcus and Luna from a grueling strategy session, I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Raphael's contact. A tremor went through my hand. I hadn't prepared for this. I dialed. The line rang twice before Raphael's calm voice answered. Damon. Raphael, I began, my voice gruff, unpracticed in this kind of conversation. I need a favor. What is it? His tone was wary, instantly on guard. Iris, I said, and the word felt heavy, charged. I need her number. A beat of silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I could practically hear his hesitation. Raphael was protective of his pack, and Iris was clearly family to him. Why, Damon? He asked, his voice hardening, clearly suspicious. I gripped the phone, my jaw tightening. There was no avoiding this. Because she's my mate, Raphael. The words were a low growl, a raw admission that cut through the silence. The bond snapped when we sparred. I need to speak to her. Another pause, longer this time. I heard a soft sigh. I see. His tone softened, laced with surprise and something like reluctant understanding. She's not going to make this easy for you, Damon. I don't expect her to, I countered, a grim smile touching my lips. Just the number, Raphael. The numbers came quickly, recited with a sigh that bordered on resignation. I memorized them, ending the call with a quick, clipped thanks. I stared at the string of digits, the phone heavy in my hand. Tomorrow. I would call her tomorrow.
Chapter 6. The 4 hours separating Nightshade from Moonstone might as well have been a continent. After Damon left, the mate bond still hummed, but it was a softer, more distant thrum, like a far-off heartbeat. He promised to return, but he hadn't given a timeline, and my Wolfe was a bundle of anticipation and frustration. It had been a full week, and not a single communication from him. My independence was kicking in, reminding me that I'd survived just fine without him before. But there was a new, unwelcome ache that came with this particular absence. I found my father, Dominic, in the old barn, meticulously sharpening his favorite hunting knife. His fur was a little grayer than it used to be, but his hands were as steady as ever, his focus absolute. He looked up as I approached, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Hey, kiddo," he grunted, a familiar warmth in his voice. "Figured you'd be around. You've been pacing like a caged wolf for days." I scoffed, nudging his arm with my elbow. "I don't pace, and I'm fine." I plopped down on an overturned crate, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. "Just got some stuff on my mind." He chuckled, setting the knife down and giving me his full attention. Something to do with that scary alpha, perhaps." He'd caught the edge of Damon's scent on me after our spar, and he knew. He always knew. I sighed, finally letting my shoulders drop. "He's my mate, Dad." The words still felt surreal, foreign on my tongue. "The bond snapped when we sparred, in the training grounds." My father's brows shot up. "Well, Moon Goddess finally decided to bless my wild child." He leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. A Blackthorne, eh? Wish I'd gotten a look at the man, missed him by a whisker. You didn't miss much, I muttered, though my wolf silently disagreed. He eyed me, a knowing glint in his gaze. Didn't you? You got that look like you swallowed a firefly. He paused, then his expression grew serious. I gotta see him, Iris. I need to see him with my own eyes. Can't just trust the moon goddess on this one. I laughed, a genuine, unburdening sound. Oh, please, don't get all dramatic. We're not even a thing. He's 4 hours away. He has a pack to run. I have, well, whatever it is I do here. I waved a dismissive hand. The distance alone makes it impossible. He reached out, his calloused hand gently gripping my arm. Don't you dare close off on him, Iris, like you close off on everyone else. His voice was soft but firm. I know you've never seen a lot of normal relationships, not until Raphael and Diana, and then Luca and Maddie, and now Cayenne and Selene. He looked away for a moment, his gaze distant. Your mother and I, it was good, it was real, but then life happened. He was right. Before Nightshade, before Raphael's grounded family, my only example of a mate bond had been lost to tragedy. I'd grown up seeing alphas as figures of power and responsibility, rarely of tenderness. My own parents' bond had been cut short. It had made me wary, fiercely independent, convinced that true connection was a weakness, or at best, something that could be ripped away. But watching the couples of Nightshade, the easy affection between Raphael and Diana, Luca's quiet devotion to Maddie, Cayenne's playful protectiveness of Selene, a tiny, stubborn part of me had started to thaw. I'd begun to wonder if maybe it wasn't impossible. And now Damon. The universe truly had a twisted sense of humor. He said he'd be back, but when? I missed him. Missed the way his wolf challenged mine, the quiet understanding in his eyes. I had no idea what to do, what to feel. That evening, as I was finally winding down, trying to lose myself in a book by the glow of my bedside lamp, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My heart gave a sudden, hard thump. My wolf stirred, recognizing the distant, faint scent of pine and something else, something uniquely him. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Hello. Iris. It was him. His voice, a low, gravelly rumble, cut through the quiet of my room, sending shivers down my spine. My thumb traced the edge of my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The mate bond, dormant in its long-distance hum, suddenly flared, hot and insistent. Alpha, I said, my voice deliberately neutral, though my wolf purred with a satisfaction I refused to acknowledge. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? A soft chuckle vibrated through the phone, a sound that pulled at something deep inside me. Unexpected, after what happened on your training ground. What happened was a mutual accident, Alpha, I retorted, a faint flush creeping up my neck. A lapse in judgment on both our parts. A lapse in judgment that felt a hell of a lot like destiny, he countered, his voice dropping, turning a little dangerous. And it wasn't mutual, Iris. My judgment was perfectly sound. You, on the other hand, you seemed rather startled. My jaw tightened. I don't startle easily, Blackthorne. No, he agreed, a hint of amusement in his tone. You don't, you fight like a wild thing. But I felt you, Iris, the moment our wolves touched. You felt it too. He was direct, brutally, infuriatingly direct, and utterly right. My independence bristled, but my wolf surged, drawn to his alpha confidence. What do you want, Damon? I asked, cutting to the chase, my voice sharper than I intended. I want to talk, he said, the amusement gone, replaced by a raw intensity that even the phone line couldn't dull. I wanted to make sure you were real, that I hadn't imagined the fire between us. Fire tends to burn out, Alpha, I countered, trying to sound cool, unaffected. Not this kind, he rumbled. This kind burns hotter with distance, doesn't it? A gasp caught in my throat. He felt it too, the endless craving, the insistent pull. It was a shared torment. Why now? I asked, changing tactics. You've been back with your pack for a week, busy with your alpha duties, I assume. The words were laced with a bite, a hint of the frustration I'd bottled up. Busy with exactly that, he admitted, his voice hardening slightly. My borders are volatile, Iris. I lead a pack under constant threat. Every minute is accounted for. Believe me, calling you has been a battle of its own. Oh, poor Alpha, I scoffed, though the genuine exhaustion in his voice resonated with my own experiences of endless patrols. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, I suppose. It is, he said, and there was no humor in it now, especially when half of it is screaming for its mate. My heart skipped a beat. He was laying it bare. My own carefully constructed walls started to crumble. You said you'd be back, I whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of me, replaced by a vulnerable longing. But you didn't say when. I will be back, he stated, his voice firm, a solid anchor against the miles between us. The alliance talks are just the beginning, Iris. Raphael and I, we have more to discuss. Security protocols, joint patrols, it's unavoidable. I almost snorted. Unavoidable, right. I'll make it unavoidable, he continued, as if sensing my skepticism. Give me another 2 weeks, 3 at most. I'll have enough of my affairs in order to leave again, and this time it won't just be for talks. His words painted a vivid picture in my mind. Him striding into Nightshade, storm-gray eyes locked on mine. The sheer audacity of his confidence, the quiet promise in his voice, shook me. My Wolfe whined, a low, pleased rumble. Don't make promises you can't keep, Blackthorne, I warned. But my voice was softer now, tinged with a hope I hadn't known I possessed. I keep my promises, Iris. The weight of his conviction filled the line, especially to my mate. The call ended shortly after, a crisp, Alpha dismissal. He had things to do, and so did I, but I hung up the phone, not with the hollow ache I'd grown accustomed to, but with a strange mix of anticipation and disbelief. 2 weeks, 3 at most. The distance was still vast, the challenges still immense, but his voice, his promise, had bridged the gap, if only for a few stolen minutes. And now the mate bond didn't just hum, it sang, a powerful, undeniable melody that echoed his words. I'll be back. Chapter 7. The promise of 2 weeks, 3 at most, had become a mantra, a silent countdown ticking beneath my skin. After Damon's call, the mate bond no longer felt like a distant ache. It was a vibrant hum, a restless energy that pulsed with his every word. He was coming back. He was coming back. I buried myself in the garage, the familiar scent of oil, grease, and gasoline a comforting balm. This was my sanctuary, my escape. There was a satisfying logic to machinery, a tangible problem and solution that felt blessedly straightforward compared to the chaotic tangle of my emotions. I spent hours hunched over an engine, my hands stained with grime, the rhythmic clang of a wrench against metal a soothing beat. Losing myself in the intricate workings of a bike, coaxing power from steel and fuel, was my kind of meditation. It was raw, honest, and didn't ask me to feel things I wasn't ready to. But even as I meticulously tightened a chain or rewired an ignition, my mind would drift. 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 days. My pack mates, thanks to Raphael's big mouth and the ever-present mate bond, noticed my distracted energy. Counting down the minutes, Iris. Luca, always grinning, would tease as I walked by, polishing a carburetor. Don't worry, Maddie would chime in, patting my shoulder. He'll be here. The alpha-type ones always are. I'd just grunt or flip them off, a blush rising on my neck. It was irritating, but underneath it there was a warmth. This was family teasing me about a mate. It was new, and strangely comforting. The only solace from their relentless jabs, and the gnawing anticipation, came from Christine. Raphael and Diana's daughter, at 4 years old, was far too smart for her age. She had a mischievous sparkle in her eyes and a curiosity that rivaled my own. I absolutely adored her. One afternoon, I found her meticulously stacking colorful blocks in the living room, building what she proudly declared was a really tall Wolfe tower. Iris, she said, not looking up from her construction, when is your alpha coming back? I froze, wiping my hands on a rag. How do you know about that munchkin? She finally looked up, her expression a mix of innocence and knowing. Mommy told me, and you smell all fizzy when you talk about him, like soda pop. She giggled, then pointed to a block. He's got a big wolf, right? Like yours, but gray. I sank down beside her, a genuine smile easing the tension in my shoulders. He does, Chrissy. A very big, very gray wolf. I helped her balance a tricky block. He's coming back very soon, actually. She clapped her hands. Good. Then you can get sparkly eyes again, and maybe he won't be so scary up close. Her innocent observations always cut through my carefully constructed walls, reminding me that this bond, this Damon, wasn't just a complicated problem to solve. It was a source of undeniable joy.
Chapter 8. The 3 weeks stretched out like an eternity, yet simultaneously vanished in a blur of blood, strategy, and the relentless demands of the Moonstone Pack. After that call with Iris, her voice, sharp and defiant even over the phone, became another current in the constant hum of the mate bond. It pulled at me, a persistent, undeniable ache that intertwined with the daily grind of my alpha duties. My days were a cycle of briefings, patrols, and counterattacks. Luna Ashworth, my beta female, was a shrewd strategist, her mind like a steel trap for intel. Shadowclaw's moving west, Alpha, she'd report, her silver eyes sharp. But Iron Fangs are quiet, too quiet. Marcus Stone, my beta, was my rock, always at my side, handling logistics, ensuring our warriors were fed, rested, and ready. Our southern borders are secure for now, he'd confirm, a calming presence amidst the chaos. Even Cole Rivers, my Gamma, loyal to a fault, challenged my decisions, forcing me to explain my reasoning, ensuring I was always at my sharpest. They were my family, my pack, the pillars of my command. We trained together, bled together, celebrated small victories, and mourned our fallen. They were my strength, and they watched me closely. "You're distracted, Alpha," Luna had observed one evening, her voice low as we reviewed patrol routes. Her gaze flicked to the distant Nightshade territory on the map. She didn't press, but the concern in her eyes was clear. My pack sensed the change in me, the new, vibrant thrum of the mate bond that pulsed even through the miles. They cared fiercely, protectively, and I knew a divided alpha was a vulnerability they instinctively feared. I pushed harder, threw myself into the fray, determined to show them no such division existed. I was the storm, relentless and focused. But even amidst the roar of battle, the thrill of the hunt, a part of my mind was always counting down the days. 2 weeks, then 1, then mere hours. The morning of my departure felt like a release. Marcus and Luna saw me off, their usual stoic farewells laced with a knowing glance. "Keep your head on straight, Alpha," Cole muttered, though a faint smirk played on his lips. He knew. They all knew. The 4-hour drive to Nightshade passed in a focused haze of anticipation. The tension in my shoulders eased with every mile that melted away. The mate bond, which had been a distant hum, began to sing, louder and louder, until it was a resonant chord vibrating through my entire being. I pulled into the hidden entrance of the Nightshade compound, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth washing over me, overlaid with something else. Something warm, familiar, hers. I killed the engine of my truck, a low growl of satisfaction rumbling in my chest. And then I saw her. She was just dismounting her bike, a sleek black Harley that gleamed under the afternoon sun. She was dressed in black leather, pants molding to her strong thighs, a jacket fitting snugly over her torso. Her black curls were wild, escaping from under her helmet, and as she pulled it off, shaking out her hair, I felt the breath leave my lungs. I'd seen her in tactical gear, sweat slicked and formidable on the training grounds. I'd seen her features softened by the low light of the armory, moments before our first kiss. But seeing her like this, a vision of raw power and untamed grace, swinging a leg over that beast of a machine, it blew me away. The sight of her, all fierce independence and dangerous allure, was 10 times more potent than I could have imagined. She looked up, her blue eyes locking onto mine, and the world narrowed to just us. Her hand instinctively went to the hilt of the knife strapped to her thigh, a familiar gesture. A faint blush rose on her cheeks, but she held my gaze, challenging me. I walked towards her, the ground feeling solid beneath my boots, the promise in my heart now a living thing. "Iris," I greeted, my voice deeper than intended, a low rumble of pure appreciation. I let my gaze sweep over her, from the wild curls to the black leather, back up to her sparkling eyes. "You clean up nicely, even when you're covered in road dust." Her chin lifted, a flicker of that familiar defiance. "And you're punctual, Alpha. despite the distance. I stopped before her, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her, close enough for the mate bond to vibrate between us like a physical thing. I always keep my promises, mate. My eyes dropped to the bike, then back to her, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across my face. Especially when the reward is quite so impressive. I knew you were fire and steel, Iris, but I didn't know you were this kind of fire. I gestured to the Harley, then back to her. That bike suits you, or perhaps it's the other way around. You look dangerous and exactly where you belong.
Chapter 9. His words, low and gravelly, seemed to reverberate through the very ground beneath my feet. "And you," he murmured, his thumb brushing my jaw, his gaze burning, "look like you're right where I belong." My breath hitched. The air crackled, thick with unspoken longing. But it was his casual, possessive use of that single word, mate, earlier, that truly slammed into me. He had said it on the phone, yes, but hearing it spoken in the flesh, whispered by his lips just inches from mine, was a different kind of impact entirely. My wolf howled, a triumphant, primal sound that echoed deep in my chest. It was a claiming, an undeniable declaration. I managed a faint, defiant smile, despite the tremor in my hand as I unlatched my helmet. "Bold words, Alpha," I retorted, my voice a little breathless. "For someone who just spent 3 weeks proving how far away he can be." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that sent shivers down my spine. His thumb continued to stroke my jaw, an insistent electric rhythm. "Distance means nothing when the bond is real, Iris, as I believe we've both learned. It just makes the anticipation sweeter." His eyes dropped to my mouth, lingering there for a second, then met mine again, molten gray. "Besides, I told you I'd be back. I always keep my promises." "Promises are easy to make," I challenged, my gaze unwavering. "Keeping them when one has a whole kingdom to run, that's another matter." "And you doubt me." He raised a brow, a flicker of something dangerous yet playful in his eyes. "I question everything, Alpha," I countered, my independence bristling. "Especially things that seem too fated." He grinned, a slow, wolfish curve of his lips that made my stomach flutter. "Good, that's what I like about you. The fight, the fire." His free hand came up, tracing the curve of my leather-clad hip, sending a jolt through me. "Though I will admit, the sight of you on that bike, all black leather and wild curls, nearly made me forget every single duty I have waiting for me back home." My cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through my body that had nothing to do with the setting sun. The compliment, so direct and raw, hit harder than any blow. "Trying to distract me, Alpha." "Is it working?" His voice was a low murmur, his fingers curling slightly on my hip, pulling me infinitesimally closer. The mate bond thrummed like a vibrating string between us, taut and alive. The scent of him, pine, ozone, and that intoxicating undercurrent of his own unique musk filled my lungs, intoxicating. "Maybe," I whispered, allowing a hint of the truth to escape, my gaze falling to his mouth. The air was thick with unspoken desire, a silent battle of wills and primal longing. Every instinct screamed at me to close the distance, to lean in, to feel his lips on mine again. Just then, a familiar, deep voice cut through the charged silence. "Damon, Iris, there you are." Raphael, my head snapped up, the spell broken. Raphael was striding towards us from the direction of the pack house, a relieved but knowing expression on his face. Behind him, I could vaguely make out the figures of Marcus Stone and Luna Ashworth, already heading towards the main lodge. Damon sighed, a low sound of frustration, but his hand didn't immediately leave my hip. He turned his head just slightly, his eyes still holding mine. "Duty calls," he murmured, the wryness evident. "But we'll finish this conversation, mate, soon." His thumb gave my hip one last, lingering caress, a possessive promise, before he finally straightened and turned to face Raphael. I stood there, breathless, my body still tingling from his touch, the unspoken words hanging in the air between us. He hadn't even truly kissed me, but the intensity of that encounter, the power of his unspoken claim, had been more potent than any kiss. And he had called me mate, not in a desperate whisper, but in a challenging, confident statement. This was going to be complicated, and terrifyingly, exhilaratingly real. Chapter 10. The evening at the Nightshade Pack house had been a whirlwind of strained pleasantries and underlying tension. Alliance talks dominated the early hours, with Raphael and Damon in deep discussions, Marcus and Luna observing, and Cole Rivers casting suspicious glances in my direction. Later, at dinner, the pack buzzed with the unusual presence of Moonstone's alpha. I caught Damon's gaze across the crowded room more than once, a silent promise in his eyes that our conversation from earlier wasn't forgotten. As the night deepened and the chatter began to die down, he found me by the large window overlooking the snow-covered training grounds. The moon was a luminous orb, casting a silvery glow over the pristine white blanket. "Care for a run, Iris?" Damon's voice was a low murmur, close to my ear, sending a delicious shiver down my spine. "Just you and me, no diplomacy, no pack duties, just us." My wolf surged, a joyous tremor through my veins. The idea was intoxicating. To shed the skin of human complexities and simply be with him, unbound in our true forms. "Think you can keep up, Alpha?" I challenged, turning to face him, a playful spark in my eyes. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. Only one way to find out, Wildfire. We slipped out silently, bypassing the main doors for a less conspicuous exit. The air was crisp, biting, a promise of freedom. When we reached the edge of the tree line, away from watchful eyes, I met his gaze. There was no need for words. My body elongated, bones shifting, fur sprouting. A thrill ran through me as my silver wolf emerged, sleek and powerful, my senses sharpening to the scent of pine and crisp snow, the distant calls of night creatures. Beside me, Damon shifted. His transformation was a force of nature, larger, broader, his storm-gray wolf a magnificent creature of raw power and silent grace. He stood towering over me, his fur thick and dark, his eyes glowing with an ancient, untamed light. He nudged my flank gently with his massive head, a silent invitation, and then he was off, a blur of gray against the snow. I launched after him, every muscle screaming with the joy of the chase. We ran, we soared. The snowy landscape stretched out before us, a vast, unbroken canvas under the watchful moon. Our paws barely disturbed the powder, our movements synchronized, a silent, powerful dance. He led, a thunderous force, but he matched his pace to mine, always aware of my presence. We wove through the trees, shadows flickering around us, raced across open fields, the wind a roaring symphony in our ears. My silver fur brushed against his dark gray as we ran side by side, a fleeting touch that ignited a fire within me. He would nudge me with his nose, a playful push, and I would nip playfully at his shoulder. It was pure exhilaration, the mate bond singing a triumphant song through our shared wildness. This was us, stripped bare of human expectations, connected on a primal level. Hours passed, or minutes, time ceased to exist. We chased deer through the moonlit woods, not for a kill, but for the thrill of the chase, the sheer, boundless energy of our wolves. We slid to a halt at the edge of a frozen stream, our breaths pluming in the cold air, our flanks heaving. He turned to me, his large gray head tilting, and I knew what he wanted. We were far from any human path, alone in the vast wilderness. The shift was swift, a ripple of bone and muscle. The sharp cold of the night air embraced my skin. I instinctively crossed my arms over myself, a wave of heat rising to my face. It was normal for wolves to shift back unadorned, but standing before Damon, after the raw intimacy of our run, something in me felt exposed in a way I hadn't anticipated. A blush, foreign and unwanted, crept over my skin. Damon stood before me, his powerful physique outlined against the moonlight. He too was free of adornment, his body a testament to strength and natural grace. His storm-gray eyes softened as he looked at me, a flicker of understanding in their depths. He didn't move to cover himself, nor did he look away. Instead, he simply reached out, his hand gently taking mine. "Beautiful," he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of my hand, his voice rough with emotion. "Every part of you." His gaze held mine, warm and accepting, making the self-consciousness slowly recede. He didn't comment on my shyness, didn't make light of it. He just saw it and offered comfort. In the quiet solitude of the snowy night, beneath the unwavering gaze of the moon, the bond between us solidified, deeper and more profound than ever before.
Chapter 11. The raw intimacy of the Wolfe run had stripped away all pretense. Standing before Iris under the vast moonlit sky, both of us in our purest forms, the mate bond sang with a clarity that drowned out the distant roar of my own world. Her sudden shyness as we shifted back, the flush on her skin, the way her eyes darted away before returning to mine, it was disarming, beautiful. She was fire and steel, yes, but also a vulnerable warmth that my Wolfe instinctively craved to protect. Beautiful, I'd murmured, taking her hand, wanting to convey all the reverence and desire that surged through me. Every part of you. Her gaze held mine, and I saw the shyness recede, replaced by a deep understanding. We stood there for a long moment, the silent wilderness our witness, the only sound the rapid beat of my own heart. The walk back to the pack house was quieter than the run, but infinitely more charged. Our hands remained clasped, an unspoken agreement. The cold air was a sharp contrast to the heat radiating between our bodies, a shared warmth that seemed to defy the chill of the night. The bond thrummed, a steady, insistent pull that grew stronger with every step closer to the light and noise of the lodge. I wanted to drag her back into the woods, to lose myself in her, away from all responsibilities. But duty, always duty, called. When we reached her door, a small, private entrance at the side of the pack house that she clearly preferred, I stopped. The soft glow from a nearby window cast long shadows around us. My thumb stroked her knuckles. I could feel her rapid pulse beneath my skin. "Tonight was necessary," I murmured, my voice rougher than I intended. Her gaze met mine, wide and bright. "It was," she agreed, a breathy whisper. My Wolfe surged. There was no more denying the craving. I pulled her gently towards me, her body slotting against mine as if she were made to fit. Her hands came up, resting lightly on my chest. Her scent filled my head, intoxicating and familiar. "I told you I'd be back, Iris," I whispered, my lips brushing her temple, then her cheekbone. "And I always keep my promises." "I know," she breathed, her eyes fluttering closed. My mouth found hers. It was a slow, deliberate claiming, a deepening of the promise made in the armory weeks ago. Her lips were soft, yielding, parting slightly under mine. I tasted raw desire, the tang of her independence, the sweet surrender that bloomed beneath it. The kiss deepened, becoming a desperate, seeking dance, tongues tangling, bodies pressing together, the mate bond igniting into a roaring blaze. I pulled her closer, my arm winding around her waist, her soft curves pressing against my hard body, her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me tighter. I poured all my longing, all my pent-up frustration and fierce devotion into that kiss. Then a quiet click. My head snapped up, my body instantly on high alert, shielding Iris. Standing in the doorway a few feet away was an older male Wolfe, his presence calm but undeniably authoritative. Dominic, Iris's father. His eyes, so similar to hers, were assessing, unreadable, though a faint, knowing smile played on his lips. Iris gasped, pulling back from me slightly, a flush coloring her cheeks. "Dad!" Dominic chuckled, a low, warm sound. "Alpha, didn't mean to interrupt your good night." His gaze flickered to Iris, a mischievous glint in his eyes before settling back on me, piercing and intelligent. "Just checking on my girl. Long night for all of us, eh?" I straightened, keeping Iris tucked against my side, a silent assertion. "Indeed, sir. A very memorable night." My Wolfe was on edge, a low growl threatening, but I held it in check. This was her father. Dominic's smile widened, a genuine warmth radiating from him. "She's a handful, my Iris. Always has been. Stubborn as a mule, fierce as a wildcat. Takes a lot to keep her in line." His eyes, so like hers, held a quiet pride. "But she's worth every ounce of effort. She's loyal, true, and she'll fight for what's hers until her last breath." He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at Iris. "Just don't you ever try to clip her wings, Alpha." He didn't make a grand show, didn't issue a direct challenge. He simply stated facts, shared a profound insight into his daughter, and in doing so, he subtly assessed me, judged me, and extended a quiet, powerful acceptance. My internal Alpha was utterly disarmed. He wasn't just a father, he was a wise elder, a proud warrior who understood his daughter deeply and was trusting me with her. He didn't need to bark orders or flex his power, he simply was. And in that moment, Dominic Wolfe won my unwavering respect. "Never, sir," I said, my voice steady, my gaze holding his. "I wouldn't dare." Dominic nodded, a single approving gesture. "Good. Now I suggest you get some rest, son. You've got a long drive ahead of you. And my daughter, well, she deserves a good night's sleep after such an eventful day. He gave a final, knowing look before disappearing back inside. I sighed, pulling Iris back against me, resting my chin on her head. Your father, I murmured, a faint chuckle escaping me. He certainly doesn't pull any punches. He just wants me happy, she whispered, her voice muffled against my chest. I kissed her hair, inhaling her scent. I know. The night was drawing to a close, a cold reality setting in. I couldn't stay. My pack needed me, especially after the skirmishes of the last few weeks. This brief, stolen night had been a powerful glimpse of a future I craved, but it wasn't the time. Not yet. I have to go, I said, the words a wrenching effort. It was just past midnight. She pulled back, her eyes wide, glistening in the moonlight. Already? The disappointment in her voice was a sharp pang in my chest. I kissed her again, quick and hard, a desperate reaffirmation. Duty calls, but I'll be back, I promised, didn't I? I pulled her close, my arms wrapping around her, holding her tight, trying to memorize the feel of her in my arms and the scent of her skin. This isn't goodbye, Iris. It's just until next time. Then, with a final lingering touch, I forced myself to step away, turning my back on her luminous gaze and the quiet defiance that was already returning to her stance. The drive back to Moonstone would be brutal, the mate bond screaming its protest every mile. Chapter 12. The 4-hour drive back to Moonstone felt like a penance. Every mile that stretched between me and Iris pulled at the mate bond, a raw, screaming protest from my Wolfe. Her scent, the feel of her lips, the taste of her defiance mixed with newfound vulnerability. It was a heady, intoxicating memory that warred with the stark reality of my duties. I'd promised to be back, but as the familiar, rugged peaks of my territory rose in the pre-dawn light, I knew that promise would be hard-won. The last 3 weeks since I'd left Nightshade had been a relentless grind. My alpha responsibilities were a constant, suffocating weight. Briefings, tactical planning, leading patrols myself when necessary. My pack, Moonstone, thrived on discipline and strength. We were the Storm, known for striking fast and hard against the rival packs who perpetually coveted our resources. My grandfather built this powerhouse, and my father died defending it. I became Alpha at 26, inheriting a legacy of unyielding defense. The only reprieve, the single thread of sanity in the chaos, had been the rare, brief chats with Iris. Stolen moments in the dead of night, a few rapid-fire messages on a secure line, a quick exchange of words that somehow soothed the ever-present ache of the mate bond. It was a lifeline, a glimpse of the fierce, captivating woman who had irrevocably altered my world. Even Marcus, Luna, and Cole, my closest advisors, noticed the subtle shift in my mood after one of those fleeting exchanges. They were a tight-knit, militaristic unit, loyal to a fault, but they also recognized the primal pull of a mate, even if they were wary of its potential distractions. Then the storm broke. One night, just hours after a particularly raw chat with Iris that left me craving more, Gamma Cole Rivers was at my door, his face grim. Alpha, Shadowclaw, they hit the eastern border hard, just before dawn, broke through our perimeter patrols. My exhaustion vanished, replaced by the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was my life. This was the war I fought every day. Luna Ashworth, my beta female, was already pulling intel. Looks like a diversion, she confirmed, her silver eyes sharp. They might be trying to draw our forces east to hit our southern-western ore mines. Beta Marcus Stone, my childhood friend and most trusted advisor, had maps spread across the table, his strategic mind several steps ahead. They're bolder this time, Damon. Coordinated. This is bigger than their usual probes. The next 72 hours blurred into a relentless cycle of battle, strategy, and brutal exertion. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. The mate bond, usually a vibrant hum, was now a dull ache, buried under the raw demands of survival. There was no time for longing, only for leading. I moved from the eastern flank, pushing Shadowclaw back into their territory. My warriors, elite fighters, disciplined and proud, fought with a savage efficiency that was legendary. They respected strength above all else, and I led from the front, my gray wolf a whirlwind of teeth and claw. Hold the line! No retreat! My alpha command ripped through the air as I engaged a particularly large Shadowclaw male, his jaws snapping inches from my throat. Our clash was brutal, a dance of death on the snow-covered ground. I felt a sharp tearing sensation in my flank, a searing pain, but I ignored it, focusing on the kill. Just as I prepared for the final strike, I saw one of my younger warriors, a young female named Bella, falter, her leg twisted. A Shadowclaw warrior, seeing her weakness, lunged. There was no thought, no hesitation. Protecting my pack was instinct, ingrained deeper than even the mate bond. I roared, a primal sound of fury, diverting my attack and throwing my massive frame between Bella and her assailant. The Shadowclaw wolf, surprised by my sudden move, veered, but not enough. Its claws raked across my shoulder, a deeper, burning pain erupting as it connected. I slammed into the warrior, sending him sprawling, then finished him with a swift, decisive bite to the throat. Bella scrambled back, her eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "Alpha, thank you!" "Get back to the line," I snarled, my voice raw, already turning back to the fight. My shoulder throbbed, a hot, insistent pain that pulsed with every beat of my heart, every slash of my claws. The scent of my own blood mixed with the metallic tang of battle. I pushed the pain down, deeper, and Alpha did not falter. The attack was repelled. Shadowclaw retreated, leaving their dead behind. We had held our ground, but the cost was evident in the wounded, the grim faces of my warriors, and the throbbing, burning wound on my shoulder. Back at the pack house, Luna, ever practical, was already overseeing the healers. She caught my arm, her touch surprisingly gentle, her gaze sharp as she looked at my bleeding shoulder. "Alpha, you're injured. You need to be seen." I shrugged her off, heading straight for the war room. "It's a scratch. We need to plan our retaliation. They won't try that again." "A scratch?" Marcus countered, his brow furrowed with concern. "You saved Bella, Damon, but you took a nasty hit." I pushed open the war room door. The maps were still there, waiting. There would be no rest, no reprieve. My mind, which had fleetingly pictured Iris's face, now hardened into a fortress of duty. I could feel the weakness setting in, the dull ache of the mate bond now replaced by the sharp throb of my wound.
Chapter 13. Life at Nightshade had settled into a rhythm, one I had finally found peace in. Days were filled with the satisfying grease of the garage, the hum of an engine coming back to life under my touch. I'd lose myself in the mechanics, the clear, tangible logic of fixing things. Evenings often meant bike rides under the deepening sky, the wind whipping through my hair, clearing my head of everything but the moment. And the best parts of the day. The unexpected buzz of my phone, the screen lighting up with a message from Damon. Our chats had become a lifeline. Short, often terse, dictated by the brutal schedule of an alpha at war, but they were him. Fierce, flirty, challenging. He'd ask about my day, about Christine, about my latest bike project. I'd tease him about his kingdom, and he'd counter with a dry remark about my wildfire tendencies. I found myself looking forward to them with an eagerness that surprised me. I was really, truly starting to like him. Not just the undeniable pull of the mate bond, but him, the sharp wit, the underlying respect, the relentless drive. It felt easy despite the distance and the constant demands of his life. Then the silence began. It had been a few days since his last message. The mate bond felt dull, distant. I told myself he was busy, that I shouldn't be so quick to assume, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach with each passing hour. One afternoon, a terse command echoed through the pack house. Raphael was calling an emergency meeting in his office. My heart hammered against my ribs. Raphael never called everyone together unless it was serious. The tension in the room was palpable as every core member of the Nightshade Pack assembled. Raphael's face was grim, his usual relaxed posture replaced by stiff authority. "Moonstone Pack has been attacked," he announced, his voice clipped, cutting through the anxious silence. "Shadowclaw initiated a full-scale assault on their eastern and southern borders." A collective gasp went through the room. My breath caught. Damon. Raphael wasted no time. "Maddie," he commanded, looking at Luca's mate, our brilliant beta. "Lead the healing crew. Prepare for rapid deployment. We'll send reinforcements as soon as the portal is stable. We need to be ready to support their wounded." Maddie nodded, already turning to gather her team. "Luca," Raphael continued, turning to his beta. "You'll lead the defensive preparations here. We need to be vigilant. This could be a diversion, or Shadowclaw could move south towards us." Luca's jaw was set. Understood, Alpha. Selene, Raphael's gaze found our head witch, steady and resolute. Assign one of your witches to assist Moonstone in reinforcing their territorial wards. Prioritize strength and endurance, and make sure they coordinate closely with their sentries for continuous support. Selene's eyes glowed with fierce determination. It will be done, Alpha. As the others began to disperse, barking orders, preparing for the inevitable, Raphael's gaze found mine. Iris, you stay here. Raphael, I began, my voice tight, unable to hold it in any longer. Damon is he. He turned, his expression softening as he looked at me. He knew. Of course he knew. Don't worry, Iris, he said, his voice quiet, reassuring. I just received a brief from Marcus Stone. Damon and his pack are okay. They repelled the attack. He hesitated, then added, a little injured as Damon himself was, but nothing that won't heal. Moonstone stood strong. Relief washed over me, a dizzying wave that nearly buckled my knees. He was okay. He was alive. Chapter 14. The news that Damon and his pack were okay, just a little injured, had brought a surge of relief so profound it had left me breathless. But that relief had quickly curdled into something else, a cold, hard knot of terror in my stomach. The very intensity of my reaction, the sheer, paralyzing fear that had gripped me, was a stark reminder of why I'd built my walls so high, so impenetrable. He was okay. He was alive. Yet the screen of my phone remained dark. My thumb hovered over his contact, day after day, week after week. The urge to reach out, to hear his voice, to confirm for myself that he was truly well, was a constant, agonizing hum beneath my skin. But I didn't text him. I couldn't. Every time I even thought about typing a message, the memory of my father's haunted eyes would flash in my mind. My father, Dominic, was a formidable wolf, perhaps as strong as any alpha. But father had always preferred the quiet life, away from pack politics. He and my mother, Alara, were fated mates, living almost like loners on the outskirts of our old territory, carving out their own peaceful existence. They loved each other with a fierce, quiet devotion, and their bond was a tangible, beautiful thing. I didn't remember much from those early years, just a blur of warmth and safety, the constant presence of their shared love. Then came the day the world shattered. I was only 7 years old. My father was on a solo hunt, a long one deep in the woods. My mother and I were foraging near our den when the air shifted. A foul, metallic scent, unlike anything I'd ever known, invaded my senses. Rogues, a group of them driven by malice. My mother, sharp and swift, instantly pushed me behind a thick oak. Run, Iris, go, don't look back, she'd commanded, her voice fierce, terrified. I heard the snarls, the snapping jaws, the desperate, guttural sounds of a fight. My mother, for all her strength and courage, was not a match for a whole pack of starving, vicious rogues. I was a small pup, hidden, trembling, utterly helpless as the sounds of her struggle faded, replaced by the sickening quiet of death. I didn't move until a new presence, a familiar, overwhelming scent of pine and rage, exploded into the clearing. My father. He hadn't just arrived, he had come. He was a whirlwind of fury, a silver-gray blur of teeth and claw. He moved with a speed and ferocity I'd never seen, killing every rogue, one by agonizing one before they could even sense my presence. When he finally found me, huddled and shaking, his eyes were devoid of light. He carried me, his large frame trembling, but the vibrant warmth that was my mother was gone. The void where her powerful presence should have been was a gaping maw. The scent of her blood, faint but undeniable on his fur, clung to him like a shroud. My father was consumed by grief. It's not common in wolves for one mate to survive the death of the other. Most fated mates die almost immediately from the sheer shock and grief of separation. But he held on. For me, I remembered being utterly terrified that I would lose him too. He barely ate, barely moved, lost in a silent agony that seemed to drain the very life from him. But then I saw it. A spark. A flicker of sheer, unyielding will. He pushed through the unimaginable pain, chose to live, purely for my sake. Even as he did, even as he wrapped his love around me, becoming both mother and father, I always felt it. The immense, suffocating void he carried. The profound, never-ending ache for my mother. It showed me the true, devastating cost of loving someone so completely, of allowing yourself to be so utterly intertwined with another soul. That was when the walls began to rise, solid, unyielding. If love meant that kind of shattering, that kind of endless, agonizing pain, then I wanted no part of it. I learned to keep everyone at arm's length. Friendships were fine, camaraderie was necessary, but anything that hinted at deeper emotional connection, at the kind of vulnerability my parents had shared, I pushed it away. The moment things started to get serious, the moment I sensed a spark, a deepening affection, I'd pull back. Hard. It was a defense mechanism, a self-preservation instinct born from the ghost of my mother's final howl and the hollow grief in my father's eyes. And now Damon, my fated mate. His calls, his presence, the way he seemed to see past my defenses, had started to chip away at those walls. I had actually begun to like him, to lean into the terrifying idea of what he represented. But his sudden silence, the news of the attack on Moonstone, had brought that cold, ancient fear rushing back. The idea that something bad could have happened to him, the possibility of feeling even a fraction of the pain my father had endured, was paralyzing. I could run from rogues, I could fight any attacker, but I was utterly frozen by the sheer vulnerability of the mate bond. Then his text came. "Iris, heard you were worried. I'm fine, just recovering, still here. Damon." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, aching to type a response. How bad was the injury? "Are you truly okay?" I was so scared. But the words stayed trapped. My mind screamed at me to reply, but my muscles refused to obey. It was like an invisible force field had gone up around my fingers, a lock on my voice. I truly couldn't. A chilling realization washed over me. This was it. This was the moment I pushed him away, just like I had pushed away every other flicker of genuine connection before. I refused to let myself care for someone who could be torn from me, who could leave me as broken and haunted as my father had been. My self-preservation instinct, honed by years of solitude and that single, devastating childhood memory, was too strong. I needed to rebuild the wall, rebuild it higher. I stared at the glowing screen, the unread message a beacon of a future I was too afraid to embrace. The phone felt heavy, a brick in my hand, as I slowly, deliberately placed it face down on my bedside table. The silence returned, thick and oppressive, but this time it was a silence I had chosen. A silence that promised safety, but also a profound, aching loneliness.
Chapter 15. The next few weeks were a blur of adrenaline, blood, and strategic maneuvers. Shadowclaw, emboldened and coordinated, had launched a relentless assault, pushing deeper than ever before. But they hadn't accounted for the newly forged alliance. Moonstone and Nightshade, two of the North's most formidable packs, now stood shoulder to shoulder against the encroaching darkness. My days began before dawn and ended long after dusk. I was everywhere. On the front lines, my gray wolf a blur of controlled fury. In the war room, reviewing maps with Marcus and Luna. Tending to the wounded, forcing my weary body to push past its limits. My injured shoulder, a constant throb under my fur, was a stark reminder of the close call with Lyra and the Shadowclaw warrior. I ignored it, pushing through the pain. An alpha couldn't afford weakness. Marcus Stone, my beta, was my shadow, my steady anchor in the storm. While I commanded the shifting lines of battle, he orchestrated the logistical nightmare of a full-scale war. He managed supplies, ensured our warriors were rotated, and kept lines of communication open with Nightshade's command. "Another 20 healers just arrived," he'd report, his voice calm even as chaos erupted around us. "And Lyra's team from Nightshade is securing the eastern flank. Their stealth is invaluable." His strategic mind was a perfect foil to my raw aggression, allowing me to focus on the immediate threats while he managed the broader picture. Luna Ashworth, our beta female, proved indispensable. Her diplomatic skills, honed from years as a warrior turned intelligence gatherer, were key in maintaining cohesion between our two packs. She managed external relations, ensuring Nightshade's warriors felt respected and integrated. More importantly, she pulled crucial intelligence, anticipating Shadowclaw's movements, often spotting their traps before we walked into them. "Their left flank is weak near the old river bend," she'd report, her silver eyes gleaming with calculated insight. Sometimes her gaze would linger on me, a flicker of concern in her sharp eyes, no doubt sensing the mate bond's silent strain, but she never spoke of it. And then there was Cole Rivers, my gamma and cousin. He was the embodiment of Moonstone's fierce, protective loyalty. Head of pack security, he personally led patrols into contested zones, ensuring no Shadowclaw stragglers lingered, no hidden ambushes awaited. He was fiercely protective of our pack, and of me. "You're pushing too hard, Alpha," he'd grumble once after I'd returned from 3 days of continuous fighting. His tone was rough, but the concern in his eyes was clear. He trusted me implicitly, but he wasn't afraid to voice his worries, a quality I valued. The reinforcements from Nightshade were a game changer. Raphael's healers, led by Maddie, were swift and efficient, patching up our wounded with a skill that saved countless lives. The addition of Celine's witches and their powerful wards around our territory was a comfort I hadn't known I needed, an invisible shield that radiated quiet power and protected our den. And their warriors, silent and deadly, moved through the shadows with a grace that our more direct combatants couldn't match. I appreciated every single one of them. The alliance, once a political necessity, had become a brotherhood forged in the crucible of battle. Finally, after weeks of relentless fighting, Shadowclaw faltered. Their lines broke, their morale shattered. We pushed them back, further than ever before, their whimpering retreats echoing through the ravaged forests. The war wasn't over, not truly, but this battle was won. Moonstone, reinforced by Nightshade, had emerged victorious. As the last of the Shadowclaw stragglers vanished over the horizon, a profound exhaustion settled over me. The adrenaline drained, leaving my body heavy, every muscle aching, every bone screaming. I stood on a blood-soaked field, surrounded by my panting, victorious warriors, the taste of ash and triumph in my mouth. And then, like a cold splash of water, the thought of Iris hit me. Weeks. It had been weeks since I'd heard from her, weeks since I'd been able to send a single message. My phone battery dead, my focus absolute. My injury, the endless duties, the raw demands of war, they had consumed every waking moment. But her silence, it was a raw, familiar ache, a new kind of wound. Had she heard? Did she know? Was she worried? Or had she simply decided this was too much? A sharp pang of hurt quickly suppressed pierced through the exhaustion. Now was not the time. There were casualties to account for, patrols to organize, a pack to rebuild. The victory felt hollow without her, but that was a weakness I couldn't afford right now. Not while the storm raged.
Chapter 16. I threw myself into work at the garage, seeking refuge in the familiar bite of oil and gasoline that clung to everything. My clothes, my skin, my lungs. The Harley became my salvation and my punishment, carrying me down empty highways until my muscles screamed and the engine's roar drowned out the chaos in my head. But even at 90 miles an hour, I couldn't outrun the mate bond. It stretched between us like a live wire, crackling with phantom sensations that made my chest tighten and my Wolfe pace restlessly beneath my skin. Sometimes I'd catch myself pressing a hand to my ribs, where an echo of pain bloomed for no reason. Sometimes my heart would skip, and I'd know somehow, inexplicably, that he was thinking of me. Is he hurt? Is he healing? Is he alive? The questions carved deeper trenches in my mind with each passing day, but my thumb remained frozen over his contact. I had rebuilt the wall between us, reinforced it with concrete and steel and sheer stubborn will. It had to hold. Days blurred into weeks. The silence from Moonstone territory felt ominous, like the stillness before a storm that never came. Our pack moved through the motions of normal life, but tension crackled in every conversation, every sidelong glance. We were all waiting. Then Raphael called us together. He stood before us in the clearing where we held our formal gatherings, moonlight carving harsh shadows across his weathered face. But for the first time in weeks, his shoulders weren't rigid with stress. "Shadowclaw has retreated," he announced, his voice carrying across the assembled pack like a prayer answered. "Moonstone, with our aid, broke their advance. The enemy scattered to the winds. The immediate threat is over." The relief hit me like a physical blow, so sudden and overwhelming that my knees nearly buckled. Around me, pack members embraced, some crying, others whooping with joy. But I stood frozen in the center of the celebration, my Wolfe singing with fierce, primal satisfaction. "He's safe, he's alive, he's safe." The thought repeated like a mantra, but close on its heels came the familiar specter of fear. Safe now, yes. But for how long? How long before the next threat, the next battle, the next time I'd have to wonder if he was bleeding out somewhere beyond my reach? 3 days later, my phone lit up the darkness of my bedroom. The familiar buzz sent electricity shooting through my veins before I even looked at the screen. It was him. It was always him. My heart knew before my eyes confirmed it. Iris, it's over. For now, hell of a fight, but we won. Just wanted you to know. I'm coming to see you. Soon. Missing you like hell, wildfire. Can't stop thinking about that run we took. I read the message once, twice, 3 times until the words blurred together. Missing you like hell. The raw honesty of it hit me like a sucker punch. No games, no careful distance, just truth, laid bare and vulnerable. My Wolfe responded with a surge of longing so fierce it stole my breath. She wanted to run to him, to press her muzzle against his throat and reassure herself that he was whole, that he was real. But then the fear crashed over me like a rogue wave. I thought of my father, sitting alone in his chair night after night, staring at nothing. I thought of the hollow look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching, the way he sometimes reached for empty air as if expecting to find a familiar hand there. I thought of how he'd never fully recovered from losing my mother, how grief had carved him into a shell of the man he used to be. What would it feel like to lose Damon? To feel that mate bond snap like a severed nerve, leaving nothing but phantom pain and endless, echoing silence? Would I become like my father, a ghost haunting the ruins of her own life? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. I could text back. I could tell him I missed him too, that I was so relieved he was safe I could barely breathe. I could ask when he was coming, could count the hours until I saw him again. But the words died in my throat, strangled by terror so complete it paralyzed me. Getting closer to him meant giving him more of myself to lose. It meant tearing down the walls I'd built, leaving myself exposed and defenseless against a pain I knew would destroy me. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't survive it. My eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. With a shaking hand, I slowly, deliberately turned the phone face down on my nightstand. The screen went dark, taking his words with it. The silence rushed back in like a tide, filling every corner of my room, my lungs, my heart. It was a silence I had chosen, my shield and my prison, my protection and my punishment. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. My wolf lifted her head, wanting to answer, wanting to run, wanting to be free. But I held her back, just like I held back everything else that might save me from this suffocating cage I'd built around my own heart.
Chapter 17. 3 days. 3 fucking days since I'd sent that text, and nothing. I stared at my phone for the 100th time, the screen mocking me with its emptiness. No response, no acknowledgement, not even a simple "glad you're alive." The silence cut deeper than any blade I'd faced in battle, leaving a wound that wouldn't heal. My wolf prowled restlessly beneath my skin, agitated by the mate bond that hummed with her emotions. Fear, longing, pain, but gave me no direct line to her heart. I could feel her, could sense the turmoil she was drowning in, but I couldn't reach her, couldn't break through whatever wall she'd built between us. Missing you like hell, wildfire. Can't stop thinking about that run. I'd meant every word, especially the part about coming to see her. I'd told her I was coming, had laid it out clear as day. The confession had cost me, laying my heart bare in a way that went against every instinct I had as an alpha. But I'd done it because she was worth it, because what we had was worth fighting for. Apparently, she disagreed. The hurt burrowed deep, settling in my chest like a physical weight. I understood fear. Hell, I'd felt it myself when I thought I might not make it back from the battle with Shadowclaw. But this silence felt like rejection, like she was cutting me out of her life as cleanly as a surgeon's blade. I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm going to see her," I announced to Marcus as I strode through the pack house, grabbing my keys and jacket. My beta looked up from the reports he was reviewing, concern flickering across his face. "Damon, maybe you should..." "Should what? Wait for her to decide I'm worth a 2-word response?" The words came out harsher than I intended, edged with the pain I was trying to hide. "I need to see her, Marcus. I need to know what the hell is going on." The drive to Nightshade territory felt endless, my Wolfe pacing anxiously as miles of highway disappeared beneath my wheels. Every part of me ached to see her, to hold her, to convince myself she was real, and not just some beautiful dream I'd conjured in the heat of battle. But when I arrived at the Nightshade compound, the first person I encountered wasn't Iris. Damon! Keon's voice boomed across the courtyard, his easy grin immediately putting me at ease despite my churning emotions. Didn't expect to see you here, man. Good to see you in one piece. Keon had always been like that, effortlessly friendly, the kind of guy who could make anyone feel welcome. His casual demeanor was exactly what I needed right now, a buffer against the intensity of my own feelings. Good to be in one piece, I replied, managing a smile as we clasped hands. Is Iris around? Something flickered in Keon's expression, too quick for me to read. She's around. Come on, let's find Raphael. He'll want to see you. I followed him toward the main house, my eyes scanning the area automatically. No sign of her bike, no hint of her scent on the evening breeze. The absence felt like a physical blow. Raphael emerged from the house before we reached the door. Luca closed behind him. The alpha's weathered face creased into a genuine smile as he approached, and I felt some of the tension in my shoulders ease. Whatever else was happening, I had allies here. Damon, Raphael's handshake was firm, steady. I'm glad to see you well. We heard the battle was brutal. It was, I replied simply, but we prevailed, thanks to your support. We're stronger together, Luca added, his quiet intensity balancing Keon's easy warmth. That much was proven. As we talked, I found myself genuinely enjoying their company. These men had fought beside my pack, had bled for our cause. The bond between us felt natural, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. It was the kind of alliance that could last generations. Damon! I turned at the sound of a warm, melodious voice. A woman approached us with graceful steps, her elegant bearing marking her unmistakably as Luna. She was beautiful in a refined way, silver threading through her dark hair, laugh lines framing intelligent eyes, an aura of gentle authority that spoke of years leading a pack with wisdom and compassion. Diana, Raphael said, pride evident in his voice as he drew her close. This is Damon Blackthorne, Alpha of Moonstone. An honor, Diana said, inclining her head with the perfect balance of respect and dignity. We're grateful for your pack's courage. Please, consider our home yours. A young girl peeked out from behind Diana's skirts, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's thoughtful eyes. And this shy little wolf is our daughter Christine, Diana added with a gentle laugh, coaxing the girl forward. Christine offered a small wave before ducking back behind her mother, making everyone chuckle. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it made my chest ache with longing. This was what I wanted, a family, a mate to stand beside me, children to carry on our legacy. This was what Iris was running from. Actually, I said, trying to keep my voice casual, I was hoping to see Iris. Is she around? Raphael's expression shifted subtly, becoming more guarded. She went out for a ride earlier, should be back in a few hours. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. A ride. Of course she had. I'd told her I was coming, had specifically said I wanted to see her soon, and she'd chosen to be anywhere but here when I arrived. The message was crystal clear. She didn't want to see me. The rational part of my mind tried to make excuses. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe she had pack business to attend to. But the wounded part of me, the part that had been festering in silence for 3 days, knew better. She'd gotten my text. She'd known I was coming, and she'd chosen to run. I see, I managed, hoping my disappointment didn't show. Well, I can't stay the night, pack business back home, but I was hoping. I trailed off, the admission too pathetic to voice. I was hoping she'd be here waiting for me. I was hoping she'd want to see me as much as I needed to see her. I was hoping that telling her I was coming would mean something to her. Raphael's eyes softened with understanding. She should be back soon. Why don't you join us for dinner while you wait? Diana makes the best venison stew this side of the mountains. I'd like that, I said, grateful for the invitation and the chance to stay busy while I waited. But as we headed inside, I couldn't shake the hollow feeling in my chest. She was out there somewhere, riding free while I sat here like a lovesick fool, counting the minutes until she came home, if she even wanted to see me when she did. The mate bond thrummed with distant emotion, restlessness, that familiar fear, and something else I couldn't quite identify. She was feeling something, but I had no way of knowing if it had anything to do with me. All I could do was wait.
Chapter 18. The moment I caught his scent on the evening breeze, I ran. My wolf had lifted her head first, ears pricked with sudden alertness. Then the familiar musk and cedar hit me like a physical blow, and I knew. He was here. He'd actually come, just like he'd said he would in that text I'd left unanswered. I couldn't face him. Couldn't look into those dark eyes and see the hurt I'd caused. Couldn't feel the pull of the mate bond trying to drag me back into his orbit. So I did what I always did when the walls felt like they were closing in. I grabbed my keys and fled. The Harley roared to life beneath me, and I gunned it out of the compound before anyone could stop me. The wind whipped against my face as I pushed the bike harder, faster, trying to outrun the guilt clawing at my chest. He'd driven all this way to see me, and I was running like a coward. But I couldn't help it. The alternative, standing there and pretending everything was fine while my heart hammered against my ribs, felt impossible. I rode for hours, taking back roads and mountain trails until my hands were numb with cold and my thoughts had quieted to a manageable hum. When I finally glanced at my phone, it was past 11. Surely he'd be gone by now. Surely he wouldn't wait this long for someone who clearly didn't want to see him. The compound was mostly dark when I returned, just a few lights still burning in the main house. I parked my bike as quietly as possible and started toward my cabin, my boots crunching softly on gravel. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the side of my cabin, a shadow in the darkness, but I'd know that silhouette anywhere. My heart lurched, part panic and part treacherous relief. He'd waited. Despite everything, he'd stayed. Iris. His voice was low, rough with exhaustion, and something else I didn't want to identify. As I drew closer, moonlight revealed the fresh wound on his cheek, a thin line that looked like it had been cleaned but not properly tended. His left hand bore scraped knuckles, the kind you got from hitting something hard. My fingers twitched with the instinct to reach for him, to trace that cut and ask what had happened. The urge was so strong it physically hurt to resist it. Instead, I let ice crystallize in my veins, pulling the familiar armor of indifference around myself like a shield. "You should go," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "I'm tired." He straightened, and I caught the flash of hurt that crossed his features before he masked it. "Iris, what's going on? I've been waiting for hours, I thought. After our run together, after everything we talked about." His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that made my chest constrict painfully. This wasn't the commanding alpha I'd first met, or even the confident male who'd kissed me breathless in the moonlight. This was just Damon, raw and uncertain, trying to understand why his mate was pushing him away. "The bond doesn't mean anything to me," I said, each word like swallowing glass. My voice stayed perfectly level, betraying nothing of the chaos screaming inside me. "Bullshit." The word cracked like a whip, and suddenly the vulnerability was gone, replaced by frustration and pain. "You felt it too, Iris. I know you did. Don't lie to me." I forced myself to shrug, to look bored rather than devastated. "You should go back to your territory, Damon." He stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "Iris, please, just talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." His voice broke slightly on the last word, and I felt something crack inside my chest. But I couldn't let it show. I couldn't let him see how much this was destroying me. "There's nothing to work through," I said coldly. "You need to leave, now." For a long moment, he just stared at me, his eyes searching my face for something, any crack in the mask I was wearing. When he found nothing but cold indifference, something in him seemed to break. "Fine," he said quietly, his voice hollow. "If that's really how you feel." I wanted to tell him it wasn't, wanted to reach for him and explain that I was lying, that I felt everything so intensely it terrified me. But I stayed frozen, letting him believe the worst. "I won't keep chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught," he said, not looking at me anymore. His voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor underneath, the sound of a man trying not to fall apart. He walked away then, his footsteps echoing in the silence. I stood frozen until I heard his truck start, until the sound of his engine faded into the distance. Only then did I notice the wetness on my cheeks. When had I started crying? When had the tears I'd fought so hard to contain finally broken free? As I finally made it inside my cabin and closed the door behind me, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and haunted. I looked exactly like what I was, a coward who just sent away the one person who might have made her whole. But at least I was safe. At least I wouldn't have to feel the devastating loss that would come when the mate bond inevitably shattered. At least I was alone, just the way I'd chosen to be. The silence that followed felt different this time, not protective but empty, not peaceful but hollow. For the first time since I'd started building my walls, I wondered if I'd built them too high to ever tear down again.
Chapter 19. The drive back to Moonstone territory felt endless, every mile stretching like a knife wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, but I couldn't seem to loosen them. Couldn't seem to do anything but replay her words over and over in my mind. The bond doesn't mean anything to me. You need to leave. Now. The coldness in her voice had been absolute. No hesitation, no flicker of emotion behind those blue eyes. Just nothing. Like I was nothing to her. I'd told her I wouldn't chase someone who didn't want to be caught, and I'd meant it in that moment. But as the highway stretched before me in the pre-dawn darkness, I realized the bitter truth. I didn't think I could stop. Not when it came to her. Not when every fiber of my being screamed that she was mine, that we belonged together. My wolf paced restlessly beneath my skin, wounded and confused. He didn't understand the rejection any more than I did. To him, she was mate. Simple as that. Her scent called to him, her presence soothed him, her touch set him on fire. The bond between us was as real as breathing, and yet she dismissed it like it was nothing. Why? The question tormented me as I drove through the growing light of dawn. What had I done wrong? What had changed between that perfect run we'd shared and this cold dismissal? She'd been so alive in my arms, so responsive to my touch. The way she'd looked at me after we'd kissed, I couldn't have imagined that connection. I couldn't have been that wrong about what was between us. But apparently I had been. I reached the pack house just as the sun crested the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that felt like a mockery of the hope I'd carried with me yesterday. 6 a.m., and I was already exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the drive. Damon? Marcus was waiting for me in the main hall, his expression immediately shifting from curiosity to concern when he saw my face. What happened? You look like hell. Nothing happened, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. That's the problem. I brushed past him before he could ask more questions, heading straight for my office. Work. That's what I needed. Something to focus on besides the hollow ache in my chest where my heart used to be. The Morrison Border Patrol reported some strange scents yesterday, Marcus said, following me despite my obvious desire to be alone. Could be nothing, but I'll handle it, I cut him off, already reaching for the report stacked on my desk. What else? Damon, you just got back. Maybe you should rest. I'm fine. The words came out sharper than I meant them to. What else needs my attention? Marcus hesitated, and I could feel his eyes studying me. He'd been my beta for years. He knew me well enough to recognize when something was wrong. But he also knew me well enough to recognize when I didn't want to talk about it. The new recruits need evaluations, he said finally. And there's been some tension between the younger wolves and the established pack members. Nothing serious, but it might be worth addressing. Schedule the evaluations for this afternoon, I said, not looking up from the paperwork. And set up a meeting with the senior wolves for tomorrow. We'll discuss pack dynamics. Damon, that's all, Marcus. He stood there for another moment, and I could feel his concern radiating across the room like heat from a fire. But eventually, he nodded and left me alone with my thoughts and the mountain of work I was using to bury them. Hours passed. I threw myself into pack business with a single-minded focus that bordered on obsession. Budget reviews, territory assessments, training schedules, anything to keep my mind occupied. but no matter how hard I tried to concentrate, my thoughts kept drifting back to her. The way she'd looked on her bike that first day, leather jacket molded to her curves, hair whipping in the wind. The fierce light in her eyes when she'd challenged me. The way she'd never backed down even when facing an alpha. The softness of her skin under my hands, the taste of her lips, the little sounds she'd made when I'd kissed her neck. She was everything I'd never known I wanted in a mate. Strong, independent, fierce enough to stand beside me rather than behind me. Beautiful in a way that took my breath away, but it was more than that. She had fire, passion, a wildness that called to something deep in my soul, and she didn't want me. My Wolfe whined, a sound of pure pain that I felt in my bones. He didn't understand rejection, didn't understand why his mate would push him away. All he knew was that she was out there somewhere, and he wasn't with her. The bond between us pulled tight, an invisible cord that stretched across the miles, reminding me with every heartbeat that she existed, that she was mine, that I was failing to claim what belonged to me. No, I corrected myself harshly. She doesn't belong to me. She made that crystal clear. Alpha? I looked up to find one of the younger pack members hovering in my doorway, looking nervous. What is it, Jake? Marcus sent me to remind you about lunch, he said, fidgeting with the papers in his hands. It's past 2 and you haven't eaten anything today. Had I really been sitting here for 8 hours? I glanced at the clock on my desk, surprised to see he was right. The day had vanished in a haze of paperwork and painful memories. I'm not hungry, I said, turning back to my work. But Alpha, I said I'm not hungry. The words came out as a growl, and Jake immediately backed away, his eyes wide. Yes, Alpha. Sorry, Alpha. He disappeared quickly, and I felt a stab of guilt. It wasn't his fault I was falling apart. It wasn't anyone's fault but my own for believing that what I'd felt with Iris was real, was mutual, was worth fighting for. The afternoon dragged on. More reports, more meetings, more desperate attempts to fill the silence in my head with anything but thoughts of her. But she was everywhere. In the scent of pine that drifted through my open window, in the sound of a motorcycle passing on the distant highway, in the empty space beside me that felt like it should be filled. By evening I was running on fumes and stubbornness alone. My Wolfe was exhausted from fighting the bond, from trying to understand why his mate had rejected him so completely. And I was just broken. Marcus appeared in my office again as the sun set, his expression grim with determination. That's enough, he said, closing the door behind him. You haven't eaten, you haven't slept, and you've been snapping at everyone who tries to help you. Talk to me, Damon. What the hell happened?
Chapter 20. The days blurred together in a haze of gray monotony. Work at the garage, patrol routes, mechanical tasks that required just enough focus to keep my mind from wandering, but not enough to truly distract me from the hollow ache that had taken up permanent residence in my chest. I'd become a ghost haunting my own life. Iris, honey, can we talk? My father's voice drifted through my cabin door, gentle but persistent. He'd been trying to reach me for weeks now, leaving plates of food I barely touched, knocking softly when he thought I might be ready to let someone in. But I couldn't face him, couldn't bear to see the understanding in his eyes, the recognition of my pain that would mirror his own too closely. I stayed silent, curled on my couch with a book I wasn't reading, and eventually his footsteps retreated. Everyone had tried at first, Deanna bringing homemade soup and soft smiles, Christine leaving little drawings under my door, stick figures of wolves running together under crayon moons. Even Kyan had attempted his easy humor, cracking jokes that fell flat against the wall I'd built around myself. But I was unreachable, untouchable, trapped behind glass that no one could break through. The pack had stopped trying after the first month. Now they just watched me with worried eyes and gave me space, which was exactly what I thought I wanted. The space felt suffocating. I threw myself into patrol duties, taking the longest routes, the most isolated sectors. The rhythm of running the borders became meditation, paws hitting earth, breath steaming in cold air, the repetitive motion that asked nothing of my heart. I could lose hours this way, sometimes forgetting to shift back until long after dark. My bike became another escape. Long rides through mountain passes, engine noise drowning out everything else. I'd pushed the Harley until my hands were numb and my thoughts finally quieted, returning home exhausted enough to sleep without dreams. It was a gray Tuesday morning when Raphael's voice cut through my self-imposed isolation. "Pack meeting tonight," he announced during the morning briefing. "We've got visitors coming. Marcus from Moonstone will be joining us to discuss territory boundaries and resource sharing." My blood turned to ice. Marcus, Damon's beta. "Will," I started, then stopped, my voice catching. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Will Alpha Blackthorne be accompanying him?" Raphael's eyes found mine across the room, sharp with concern. "That's the plan." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. All I could hear was the thundering of my own heartbeat. All I could feel was the mate bond stretching taut across the miles, suddenly alive with anticipation and terror. He was coming here. After months of silence, months of carefully constructed distance, he would be in the same room as me, breathing the same air. I should run. Every instinct screamed at me to grab my keys and disappear into the mountains until it was over. I'd done it before. I could do it again. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the bond had been aching lately, a constant throb that no amount of distraction could ease. Maybe it was the dreams that had started creeping in despite my exhaustion, flashes of dark eyes and gentle hands, the memory of cedar and musk that made me wake gasping. Or maybe it was simple, desperate hunger. I wanted to see him, even if he hated me now, even if looking at him would tear open wounds I'd been trying so hard to heal. I needed to know he was real, that what we'd shared hadn't been some fevered dream I'd conjured in my loneliness. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to work, tried to focus on routine tasks, but my hands shook every time I thought about facing him. What would I see in his eyes? Anger? Indifference? Something worse, pity. By evening, I'd changed clothes 3 times, settled on jeans and a simple sweater, then changed again. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt like armor strong enough to protect me from whatever was coming. I arrived at the pack house early, slipping into the back of the meeting room where I could observe without being noticed. The familiar sense of my pack surrounded me, comfort I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months. But underneath it all, I waited for that one scent that would change everything. Raphael stood at the front of the room, checking his watch. They should be here any minute. The main door opened, and my heart stopped. But it was only Marcus who walked through. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the easy confidence of a man used to command. He carried himself like an alpha, though the scent told me he was beta. His eyes swept the room in automatic assessment before settling on Raphael with professional courtesy. I waited, searched the doorway behind him for the familiar silhouette that would make my world tilt on its axis. Nothing. "Marcus," Raphael said, extending his hand in greeting. "Good to see you again. Where's Damon?" The question I couldn't ask hung in the air, and I held my breath waiting for the answer. Marcus's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Alpha Blackthorne sends his regards, but he was unavoidably detained with pack business. He asked me to handle the negotiations in his absence." The words hit me like physical blows. Unavoidably detained. Pack business. He wasn't coming. After months of wondering, of hoping for just a glimpse of him, he'd chosen not to come. The rejection was so complete, so final, that I felt something crack inside my chest. Of course he hadn't come. Why would he? I'd made it crystal clear that the bond meant nothing to me, that he meant nothing to me. I'd been cold, cruel, absolute in my dismissal. What had I expected? That he'd keep showing up, keep trying to win over someone who'd rejected him so thoroughly. I'd wanted him to stop chasing me, and he had. The fact that it felt like dying was my own fault. The meeting continued around me, voices discussing borders and resources and mutual aid agreements. But I heard none of it. All I could focus on was the empty space where he should have been, the absence that felt louder than any presence. I slipped out before anyone could notice my leaving, my legs carrying me automatically toward the stables. I needed to run, needed to shift and let my wolf take over, let instinct drown out the pain that was threatening to consume me. But even as I ran through the forest, paws pounding against earth worn smooth by countless pack runs, I couldn't escape the truth that followed me like a shadow. I had gotten exactly what I'd asked for. I'd pushed him away, convinced him I didn't want him, made him believe the bond was meaningless. So why did his absence feel like a piece of my soul had been torn away? Why did the silence I'd fought so hard to create feel like the loudest sound in the world? And why, despite everything I'd done to protect myself from the pain of losing him, did I feel more lost than I ever had before?
Chapter 21. I stood at my office window, watching Marcus's taillights disappear down the mountain road, and felt a piece of my soul go with him. He was heading to Nightshade territory. To her. And I was staying here like a coward. The rational part of my mind insisted I was doing the right thing. She'd made it clear she didn't want me there, that my presence was unwelcome. Sending Marcus was respectful, professional. Exactly what an alpha should do when his mate had rejected him so completely. But rational thought did nothing to ease the agony clawing at my chest. It had been 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days since I'd last seen her. Not that I was counting. Not that I lay awake at night calculating the exact number of hours since she'd looked at me with those cold blue eyes and told me the bond meant nothing to her. My desk drawer held the only thing keeping me sane, a handful of photographs I'd taken during pack meetings before everything went to hell. Iris in the background of group shots, her attention focused elsewhere, unaware of the camera. Her profile as she listened to pack business. Her hands as she worked on someone's bike in the Nightshade garage. I'd felt like a stalker taking them, but I couldn't help myself. When the mate bond pulled so tight it felt like it might snap, when her absence felt like suffocation, I'd look at those pictures and remember that she was real, that what we'd shared, however briefly, had existed. Pathetic didn't begin to cover it. The sound of a motorcycle engine rumbling up the drive made my heart leap into my throat. For one wild, impossible moment, I thought. But the bike that came into view wasn't the sleek Harley I'd memorized in my dreams. This was a classic Indian, well-maintained but older, ridden by a man with graying hair and familiar blue eyes. Iris's father. I watched him park and remove his helmet, moving with the same fluid grace his daughter possessed. So that's where she got her love of bikes. The knowledge felt precious, another small piece of the puzzle that was Iris Wolfe. James, my father's beta, now retired wolf in our pack, appeared from the main house and spotted Dominic. They shared a conversation and started walking towards my office. "Son," James said, "Dominic Nightshade is here to talk with you." "Sir," I said, extending my hand with the respect due to a senior pack member. Dominic's grip was firm, his blue eyes, so much like hers, studying me with quiet intensity. We settled on the back porch with coffee and the kind of comfortable silence that comes from years of pack alliance. But I could feel Dominic's gaze on me, assessing, weighing something I couldn't identify. Finally, he spoke. "How are you doing, son?" The simple question hit harder than it should have. How was I doing? I was dying by inches, going through the motions of leadership while my heart bled out slowly. I was obsessing over photographs like a lovesick teenager, listening for the sound of motorcycles that would never carry her to me. "I'm fine," I lied. Dominic's expression suggested he saw right through me. "Are you?" Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. This wasn't idle conversation. This was a father worried about his daughter, trying to understand the man who'd managed to turn her world upside down. "She's pushing you away," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I couldn't deny it, couldn't pretend I didn't know who he meant. "Yes, and you're letting her." The words stung because they were true. She made her feelings clear. I'm respecting her wishes. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "Her mother and I were fated mates," he began, and I felt my breath catch. True mates, bound by the deepest connection 2 wolves can share. When Elena died, he paused, his hands tightening around his coffee mug. "When I lost her, I thought I'd die too. The pain was so complete, so devastating that I couldn't function for months. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely breathe." My chest tightened with understanding and dread. It was rare for a wolf to survive the death of their fated mate. "Iris was 7, he continued. old enough to understand what was happening, but too young to process it. She watched me fall apart, watched the mate bond nearly destroy me. I think she made a promise to herself that day. She'd never put herself in a position to feel that kind of pain. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her coldness, her rejection, the way she'd looked at me like I was dangerous, like getting close to me would destroy her. "She's terrified," I whispered. "Terrified," Dominic confirmed. "Of losing you, yes, but more than that, of losing herself to grief the way I did. She's convinced that caring about you will break her." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time I'd thought she didn't want me, that the bond meant nothing to her. But she was fighting it not out of indifference, but out of soul-deep terror. "What do I do?" I asked, the question tearing from my throat. Dominic studied me for a long moment. "Do you love her?" "More than my own life." "Then fight for her," he said simply. "Show her that love doesn't have to mean destruction. Show her that the bond can be strength, not weakness. But most importantly," he leaned forward, his blue eyes intense, "show her that you're not going anywhere, that she can't push you away no matter how hard she tries." My heart was pounding, hope and determination warring in my chest. "She won't want to see me." "No," Dominic agreed. "She'll probably run." "But Damon," he gripped my shoulder, "she's been running for months and it's destroying her anyway. At least this way she'll know someone cares enough to chase her." I was already standing, my mind racing with possibilities. 3 months. 3 months I'd wasted respecting her wishes while she suffered alone, convinced I'd given up on her. Never again. "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate for what he'd given me. Understanding, purpose, hope. Dominic smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. I was moving, keys already in my hand. The drive to Nightshade territory stretched ahead of me, but this time I wasn't going to let her run. This time, I was going to fight for my mate.
Chapter 22. The garage smelled like motor oil and disappointment. I'd been working on the same carburetor for 2 hours, but my hands kept shaking every time I heard a vehicle approach. Each time, my traitorous heart would leap, thinking maybe, just maybe, it would be him. But it never was. Marcus had left an hour ago with his diplomatic smile and careful words about productive discussions and mutual understanding. He'd been kind, professional, everything an emissary should be, everything Damon wasn't. He didn't come. The thought sat like a stone in my chest, heavier with each passing minute. I'd convinced myself I didn't want to see him, that his absence was a relief. I'd built walls so high and thick that even I believed them sometimes. But when Marcus had arrived alone, when I'd scanned the road behind him and found it empty, the disappointment had been crushing. 3 months of telling myself I didn't care, and one absent alpha had shattered the illusion completely. I was pathetic. "Get it together, Iris," I muttered, wiping my greasy hands on a rag. The Harley I'd been working on gleamed under the garage lights, every chrome surface polished to perfection. It was beautiful, powerful, ready to run. Just like I'd been running for months. The sound of an engine made me freeze. Different from the others, deeper, more refined. The purr of a luxury sedan that didn't belong in our territory. My Wolfe stirred uneasily, sensing something significant approaching. Then the wind shifted. Familiar musk and cedar. My wrench clattered to the concrete floor as the scent hit me like a physical blow. Impossible. Marcus had said he wasn't coming, had been very clear that Damon respected my wishes, my boundaries, my rejection. But that scent, his scent, was getting stronger. I backed toward the rear exit of the garage, my heart hammering against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. He couldn't be here. I wasn't ready, would never be ready to face those storm gray eyes and feel the mate bond sing between us like a live wire. Running again, beautiful. The voice came from behind me, low and rough with an emotion I couldn't name. I spun around to find Damon leaning against the doorframe, looking like every fantasy I'd tried to forget. His dark hair was windswept, his suit replaced by jeans and a black t-shirt that clung to every line of his powerful frame. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. No longer distant or respectful, they burned with an intensity that made my Wolfe whimper with want. "You're not supposed to be here," I whispered, pressing back against the workbench. "No," he agreed, pushing off the doorframe with predatory grace. "I'm supposed to be in my office, being a good alpha who respects boundaries, who lets his mate push him away without a fight." Each word was accompanied by a step closer, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. My hands gripped the edge of the workbench so tightly my knuckles went white. "I don't want you here," I said, but the words came out breathless, unconvincing even to my own ears. "Liar!" His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing across my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Your Wolfe is practically purring." She was. The traitorous creature was rolling over in blissful surrender, drunk on his proximity. I tried to step sideways to escape the cage of his arms, but he moved with me, his other hand bracing against the workbench. "Let me go, Damon." "No." The single word was soft but absolute. "I've let you go for 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. I've respected your wishes, given you space, pretended I didn't die a little more each night you weren't in my arms." The raw pain in his voice made my chest tight. "Damon." "I know," he said quietly, his forehead coming to rest against mine. "Your father told me, about your mother, about what happened to him, about why you're so scared." The mention of my father made me flinch. He had no right. "He was worried about you." Damon's hands framed my face now, holding me still when I would have looked away. "We both were. Do you know what you look like, Iris? You're fading away, becoming a shadow of yourself, and you think that's better than risking the bond." "It is better," I said fiercely, even as tears burned behind my eyes. "You don't understand what it's like to watch someone you love fall apart, to see them become a shell of who they were because half their soul was ripped away." "You're right," he said, his thumbs catching the tears that had started to fall despite my best efforts. "I don't understand that, but I understand this." His lips brushed mine, featherlight, a promise rather than a demand. "You're already falling apart, beautiful. You're already a shadow. The only difference is you're doing it alone." "I can't," I whispered against his mouth, my resolve crumbling like sand. "I can't lose you." "Then don't push me away." His kiss was deeper this time, full of desperate longing and barely leashed control. I tried to resist, to remember all the reasons this was dangerous, but my body betrayed me. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as my mind screamed warnings. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "I've missed you," he said, his voice raw with honesty. "God, Iris, I've missed you so much I couldn't think straight. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I have pictures of you in my desk drawer because looking at them was the only thing that kept me sane." The confession broke something inside me. Pictures. From pack meetings, before everything went wrong. His smile was self-deprecating. "I felt like a stalker, but I couldn't help myself. You were so beautiful, so alive, and I was dying without you." More tears came then, and I didn't try to stop them. "I missed you too," I admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep inside. "Every day, every night. I kept telling myself it would get easier, but it only got worse." "Then why?" His hands tightened on my face. "Why keep torturing us both?" "Because I'm terrified," I sobbed, the fear I'd carried for months finally spilling out. "I'm terrified of needing you so much that losing you would destroy me. I watched my father become a ghost, Damon. I can't, I won't." "Hey," his voice was firm now, commanding in a way that made my Wolfe sit up and pay attention. "Look at me, Iris." I met his storm gray eyes, seeing strength and determination there that took my breath away. "I'm not going anywhere," he said with absolute conviction. "I'm the alpha of the strongest pack in the region. I've survived challenges, territory wars, and assassination attempts. I'm not some fragile human who's going to break at the first sign of trouble." "But what ifs? What if I get hit by lightning? What if I choke on my breakfast? What if the moon falls out of the sky?" He shook his head. "You can't live your life planning for every possible tragedy, beautiful. And you can't protect yourself from pain by avoiding love. Trust me, I've watched you try for 3 months, and you're in agony anyway." He was right. I was in agony, had been since the moment I'd walked away from him. The bond I'd tried so hard to deny was still there, still pulling at me with every breath. "I'm scared," I whispered. "I know." He kissed my forehead, soft and reverent. "Be scared with me. Let me hold you while you're scared. Let me prove that I'm not going anywhere no matter how hard you try to push me away." Something inside me finally snapped, not broke, but released. Like a dam bursting, all the love and longing I'd tried to suppress came flooding out. I kissed him with everything I had, pouring months of denial and desire into the connection of our lips. He responded instantly, his arms crushing me against him as if he could make us one person through sheer force of will. The mate bond sang between us, no longer a source of fear, but of strength, completion, home. When we finally broke apart, both of us trembling with the intensity of it, I knew there was no going back. The walls I'd built were rubble at our feet, and I didn't want to rebuild them. "Run with me," I said suddenly, the words surprising even me. Damon's eyes widened. "What?" "You want to prove you're not going anywhere, that you can keep up with me?" I stepped back, my hands already reaching for the hem of my shirt. "Then run with me, in the mountains under the stars. Show me you're strong enough to be my mate." Understanding dawned in his expression, followed by something primal and possessive that made my wolf howl with anticipation. "Is that a challenge beautiful?" "Maybe." I was already moving toward the back door of the garage, my heart racing with excitement instead of fear for the first time in months. "Think you can handle it, Alpha?" His laugh was low and dangerous. "Try me." The transformation always took my breath away, the sensation of bones reshaping and muscles expanding both painful and euphoric. But tonight, with Damon shifting beside me, it felt like coming alive after months of merely existing. My wolf was smaller than his, sleek and silver where he was massive and brown, but we were perfectly matched in other ways. The moment our paws hit the forest floor, we moved in harmony, racing through the trees like we'd been running together our whole lives. He kept pace with me easily, his powerful frame cutting through the underbrush with predatory grace. When I veered toward the mountain trail, he followed without question. When I leaped over a fallen log, he was there to catch me if I stumbled. We ran for miles, through moonlit clearings and shadowed valleys, our wolves finally free to be together without human fears and complications. When I tested his speed, pushing myself to my limits, he matched me stride for stride. When I tried to lose him in the dense forest, he anticipated my moves like he could read my mind. By the time we reached the high meadow where wildflowers bloomed under starlight, we were both breathing hard but exhilarated. I shifted back to human form, not caring about my nakedness in the warm night air, and watched as he did the same. God, he was beautiful, all lean muscle and masculine grace, his skin silver in the moonlight. When he looked at me, his eyes held no judgment, no demand, just love so pure it took my breath away. "You're magnificent," he said quietly, his gaze traveling over me with reverence rather than lust. I felt magnificent. For the first time in months, I felt like myself, wild and free and unafraid. "So are you." I reached for him, no longer caring about consequences or fear. "Damon, I love you," he said before I could finish, his hands tangling in my hair. "I love your strength, your stubbornness, your fierce independence. I love the way you challenge me, the way you make me want to be better. I love you, Iris Wolfe, and I'm not giving up on us." "I love you too," I whispered, the words feeling like freedom instead of surrender. "I've loved you since the moment I met you, and it terrifies me, but I can't fight it anymore." We came together then, skin against skin, hearts beating in perfect synchronization. His kiss was gentle this time, worshipful, as if I were something precious he'd thought he'd lost forever. When we finally broke apart, he spread his jacket on the soft grass and pulled me down beside him. I curled into his warmth, my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you still scared?" he asked, his fingers combing through my hair. "Terrified," I admitted. "But I'm tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of pretending I don't need you when you're the air I breathe." His arms tightened around me. "We'll figure it out together, all of it, the fear, the bond, the future. Whatever comes, we'll face it as mates." I tilted my head to look at him, seeing nothing but truth in his storm-gray eyes. Promise me something. Anything. If this gets hard, and it will get hard, don't let me run again. Don't let me push you away out of fear. His smile was soft and devastating. Never again, beautiful. You're stuck with me now. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its genuine joy. Good, because I don't think I could survive losing you again. You won't have to, he promised, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. We're forever, Iris, the bond, the love, all of it, forever. As sleep began to claim me, wrapped in his arms under a canopy of stars, I finally understood what my father had tried to tell me all those years ago. Love wasn't weakness, it was the greatest strength of all. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it was also coming home. The last thing I remembered before dreams took me was the sound of Damon's heartbeat, steady and strong, promising me all the tomorrows I'd been too afraid to want. We were home. Epilogue. 6 months later. The sound of little feet pattering across hardwood floors woke me before my alarm could, followed by an excited squeal that made me smile even before I opened my eyes. Aunt Iris, you promised we'd work on my bike today. I cracked one eye open to find 8-year-old Christine bouncing at the foot of our bed, her dark curls wild with sleep and her bright eyes sparkling with anticipation. She was clutching a toy wrench in one small fist, already dressed in miniature coveralls that matched mine. Raphael and Diana's daughter had arrived last night for one of her coveted sleepovers, and her excitement had been building since the moment she walked through the door. Christine, Damon's sleepy voice rumbled from beside me. What have we talked about regarding bedroom doors and knocking? Sorry, Uncle Damon, she said, not looking sorry at all. But Aunt Iris promised, and it's already... She squinted at the clock on the nightstand, her tongue poking out as she worked out the numbers. It's already 7:30. I laughed, reaching out to ruffle her hair. All right, little mechanic. Give me 30 minutes to get dressed and have some coffee, then we'll get started on that Kawasaki, okay? She whooped with joy and raced out of the room, her footsteps echoing through the house as she thundered down the stairs. In the distance, I could hear my father's amused chuckle and the sound of bacon sizzling in a pan. I love that kid, I murmured, settling back against Damon's chest as his arms tightened around me. She's going to be a handful when she's older, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Just like her aunt. Hey, I protested, turning in his arms to face him. I was never that energetic in the morning. His raised eyebrow suggested he disagreed, but his smile was pure affection. Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood. The title still sent a thrill through me, even after 3 months of marriage. Mrs. Blackwood, Iris Blackwood. It had taken some getting used to, but now it felt as natural as breathing. Good morning, mate, I replied, stretching up to kiss him properly. What started as a gentle morning greeting quickly deepened, his hands tangling in my hair as I pressed closer. The mate bond hummed between us, stronger than ever now that we'd completed the mating ceremony. Sometimes I still couldn't believe how close I'd come to throwing this away, how terrified I'd been of something so perfect. We should get up, I murmured against his lips, even as I made no move to leave his arms. We should, he agreed, trailing kisses down my neck. But Christine's probably helping your father with breakfast, which means we have at least 20 minutes before. Bacon and pancakes are ready. Christine's voice carried up the stairs, followed by the sound of my father's laughter. Or not, Damon sighed, resting his forehead against mine. I grinned and climbed out of bed, already reaching for my clothes. Rain check. Always, he said, his eyes following my movements with the same hungry appreciation that never failed to make my heart skip. 20 minutes later, we were seated around the large kitchen table that had become the heart of our blended family. Dad was flipping pancakes with the expertise of someone who'd been cooking for pack members for decades, while Christine chattered excitedly about her plans for the day. And then after we fix the bike, can we go see the new foals in the pasture, and maybe visit the training grounds? Oh, and Aunt Iris, you promised to teach me that trick with the carburetor. Slow down, sweetheart, I laughed, cutting her pancakes into manageable pieces. "We have all weekend." The kitchen fell into comfortable conversation, the kind of easy domesticity I'd never imagined for myself. Dad and Damon discussed pack business while I listened with half an ear, more focused on Christine's animated description of her latest art project. This had become our routine over the past few months, since Dad and I had officially moved to Blackwood territory. Christine would visit for sleepovers whenever Raphael and Diana could spare her, which was often since they knew how much she loved her garage time with me. The house that had once felt too big for just Damon now rang with laughter and children's voices. "Speaking of this weekend," Damon said, catching my attention, "Marcus called earlier. He wanted to confirm you'd be at the Nightshade Pack meeting tomorrow." I nodded, spearing another bite of pancake. The garage expansion project. I promised I'd look over the blueprints and give my input. It had been one of the hardest adjustments, maintaining my connections to Nightshade while building a new life in this new territory. But both packs had been incredibly understanding, allowing me to consult on mechanical projects and maintain the friendships that meant so much to me. "Can I come?" Christine asked hopefully. "I want to show everyone my new wrench set, and I haven't seen Mom and Dad in one whole day." "Of course," I said, grinning at her enthusiasm. "I'm sure Raphael and Diana are missing you terribly." Christine's face lit up. "Dad said he wanted to see what I've learned about motorcycles, and Mom promised to make my favorite cookies if I was good." "She'll be so excited to see all the progress you've made," Dad said warmly, reaching over to pat Christine's shoulder. "Raphael was telling me just last week how proud he is of his little apprentice mechanic." "Grandpa Dom," Christine squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. "You're the best." Watching them together, I felt that familiar tug of contentment. Dad had bloomed in ways I'd never expected since the move. Having Christine around regularly, being part of a larger pack family, sharing his knowledge and experience, it had given him a new lease on life. "All right," I said, standing and stretching. "Ready to get your hands dirty, little mechanic." Christine was out of her chair before I'd finished speaking, racing toward the garage with her toy tools in hand. I followed more slowly, pausing in the doorway to take in the sight of the converted space that had become my domain. Damon had insisted on building me a proper garage, complete with lifts, professional-grade tools, and enough space for multiple projects. It was twice the size of my old workspace, with better lighting and ventilation. But he'd been careful to include personal touches, a wall for my favorite tools, a corner for my collection of vintage parts, even a small seating area where he could watch me work. "All right," I said, tying my hair back and pulling on my work gloves. "Let's see what we can teach you about motorcycle maintenance." The next few hours passed in comfortable companionship. Christine was a quick learner, her small hands surprisingly steady as I guided her through basic maintenance tasks. She asked endless questions, her curiosity reminding me of myself at that age. "Why does this part do that?" she asked, pointing to the carburetor I was cleaning. "Well," I began, launching into an explanation that was probably more detailed than necessary for an 8-year-old. But Christine listened with rapt attention, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You're a natural teacher," Damon's voice came from the garage entrance, and I looked up to find him leaning against the doorframe with a smile. "She's a natural student," I replied, ruffling Christine's hair. "Reminds me of someone I know." "Who?" Christine asked innocently. "You, when you were her age," Dad said, appearing beside Damon. "Always covered in grease, always asking questions about how things worked." "Really?" Christine's eyes went wide. "You were like me." "Exactly like you," I confirmed. "Drove my father crazy with all my questions." "Best thing that ever happened to me," Dad said softly, his eyes meeting mine with warmth. The afternoon flew by. We worked on Christine's small practice bike, a child-sized dirt bike that Damon had found at an auction and restored for her visits. She was getting better with the basic tools, her confidence growing with each successful adjustment. "I think that's enough for today," I said finally, noticing the way she was rubbing her eyes. "You've done excellent work." Can we work on it more tomorrow before I go home? She asked hopefully. Absolutely, I promised. But now I think someone needs a nap. She started to protest, but a jaw-cracking yawn undermined her argument. Dad scooped her up easily, her protests fading into sleepy mumbles as he carried her toward the house. You're good with her, Damon said, moving to stand behind me as I cleaned up the tools. She's easy to be good with, I replied, leaning back against his chest. Smart, eager to learn, isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Sounds like someone else I know, he murmured, echoing my earlier words. I turned in his arms, studying his face. Do you ever think about it, having kids of our own? It was a conversation we'd danced around but never directly addressed. We'd been focused on merging our lives, our packs, our futures. But lately, watching Christine, seeing how natural Damon was with her. Every day, he said quietly, do you? More and more, I admitted. I used to think I was too scared, too damaged, but seeing how good you are with Christine, how patient and kind, I think you'd be an amazing father. His smile was brilliant. And you'd be an incredible mother. You already are in many ways. Is that something you want? Soon, I mean. I want everything with you, he said simply. Kids, grandkids, 50 years of mornings like this one, but only when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline except the one you're comfortable with. I stood on my toes to kiss him, pouring all my love and gratitude into the gesture. This man, who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, who'd given me a family and a home and a future I'd never dared to dream of. I love you, I whispered against his lips. I love you too, he replied, now and always.